crumble, empires fall. She stands tall, fierce and cold. Her voice echoes a thunderous call. In the chaos, her strength unfolds. False prophets scatter, truth ascends. The world watches, mesmerized. Political cows, battle never ends. In her light, dark meets its demise. Political cow, the beacon bright, unveiling truth, vanishing night. At every post, she does the work, unmasking darkness, revealing light. Political call, the beacon bright, unveiling truth, vanishing night. Her voice cuts through, stark and raw, shattering deception, breaking the law. Political call, political call. Political call, political call. The beacon bright, unveiling truth, vanishing night. Her voice cuts through, stark and raw, shattering deception, breaking the law. Breaking the law, breaking the law, breaking the law. Political call. Icons crumble, empires fall. She stands tall, fierce and cold. Her voice echoes a thunderous call. In the chaos, her strength unfolds. False prophets scatter, truth ascends. The world watches, mesmerized. Political cows, battle never ends. And in her light, dark meets its demise. False prophets scatter, truth ascends. Truth ascends. The world watches, mesmerized. Never ends. In her light, dark meets its demise.
Hey friends, what's going on? What is going on here tonight? Excuse me. So we got quite a bit of interesting things that have happened over the course of the day. Trump again signing executive orders. I hope this continues to be a trend. Get the media together, sign the executive orders, take those questions head on. Whoever did that? I mean, we were so underwhelmed with Biden's performance. I don't think that I know of any president that was so open and direct and kind of forthcoming and bringing people in. Ooh, let me move this off the screen there. But amazing things that he's doing. Gulf of America is on Google. A lot of corporations are taking that on as an absolute. So a lot of changes happening with how we term things. Interestingly enough, we have a dilemma in front of us, and I've been talking about this for a couple of months now, that Main Street, as we like to call it, is not aligned with what Wall Street is putting out there. Democrats famously, and I'm interested in the poll. If you guys take a look at the poll out there, vote your thoughts on that. If the Federal Reserve is on the right track to help you and to promote economic growth. Main Street, Wall Street, complete disconnect in my view. And at the root of it, the dual mandate. You probably heard it a million times by now. The Federal Reserve has a dual mandate, ensuring full employment and price stability. Right? Price stability. Okay, their tool is to raise, interest rates to stamp out inflation after they've, worked with Treasury to print the heck out of the dollar over the past 4 years. But full employment, that's where things get a little hairy to me. You start diving into that and you think, what's going on, Lil Nance? You start thinking about what is the definition of full employment. Does that mean unemployment's at 4%? Unemployment's at 5%, 6%? What is the definition of full employment there, right? And the problem I have now that not enough people are talking about is full employment speaks to quantity, not quality of those jobs, right? They want to hit a certain mark so they can hit a low percentage for unemployment or whatever their target is. But who cares what the quality of those jobs are, right? So you look at all these programs that are out there that need to get reassessed and addressed that are not supportive of, wage growth in a way that benefits American workers, and pushes things towards a globalization that is to the detriment of American workers. At some point, we are going to have that completely, narrow middle class scenario. We're getting there, but this is a problem that I think needs to be addressed and solved. Let's see what these senators talk to Jerome Powell about. He's going to be on again tomorrow, I think about 9 a.m. Eastern. But full employment, it's not talked about enough. What is that definition? It's very problematic right now. They're looking at quantity of jobs, not quality. So you could have, millions of people, in the service, working minimum wage jobs, potentially, and according to their metric, everything's fine. We've reached a certain percentage of unemployment. Great, we're done. But it does not take into account the quality of those jobs, which is a problem. That's why manufacturing jobs, when you look at it, they have a much higher wage base than services or retail, right? Because it requires a significant amount of skill, significant amount of discipline, experience to do those jobs well. So let's see what they say or ask of Jerome Powell. The opening remarks will be interesting. And this is going to be something that, see Elizabeth Warren up there. They're going to hit from different perspectives. I hope at the end of the day they're aligned on getting towards the same outcome. But we may need to look for some other, thoughts or some other ideas out there to help benefit American workers, to help promote real wage growth. A lot of these metrics that folks have been pointing to over the last 4 years are just not working. Stock market's hitting all-time highs. Feel good about that. That's your scoreboard. Like we're watching points get racked up in a basketball game or something. That's not what's really going on here. I mean, so what that the stock market's going up if there's a family of 4 makes $30,000 a year and they're not invested in any stocks? What does that matter to them? They're more worried about paying rent month to month. And again, I repeat these stats over and over again, but it's the truth of it. It's scary. And you'll hear Tim Scott here in a minute talk about it. I think excuse me, 2/3 of the country has less than $1,000 in savings. Less than $1,000 in savings, which is already a diminished amount if you think of the inflation that's taken place over time here. Not that long of time, 4 years. The massive amounts of inflation that have taken place over 4 years. $1,000 is not really that much money, comparatively speaking, right? You look at data from Redfin, half of the country struggles to pay rent month to month. A quarter skip meals in order to pay rent, utilities, other essentials. I appreciate the follow. Guys, like and subscribe, help promote this content. This is a really big deal. This idea that they're pushing quantity over quality on jobs, it's a really big deal, and it needs to be talked about, and it needs to get brought to the attention of local representatives and really addressed. They're looking at the wrong numbers to claim success. That's been the case for the past 4 years, and so, as I mentioned, people struggling to pay rent month to month, not able to get groceries, skipping meals. Having next to, very little savings, if any savings at all. It's all very problematic. Super problematic at this point. So let's get this going. We'll see what the response is that Powell's going to give the senators. Nothing's been said or gone over in the past.
morning. This committee will come to order. Chair Powell, thank you for being with us today. I appreciate your willingness to have a chat with us about some of the really important issues facing our country. Without question, the Federal Reserve serves a critical role in the function of our government and the global economy. You have the ability to influence markets and directly impact the financial future of hundreds of millions of Americans. That is why the Federal Reserve is supposed to be an independent institution free from politics. But in recent reality, the Fed has been susceptible to political pressure. Take, for example, the Fed's involvement in the Network for Greening the Financial System, a group dedicated to green financing and climate change, which the Fed joined in December 2020 as President Biden was about to assume office. Just last month, the Fed announced that it had pulled out of the organization as President Trump was getting ready to be sworn in. To the American people, this is flip-flopping in the political wind. Too much focus on climate change instead of supervision is consequential. And in March, just 2 years ago, we saw the failure of Silicon Valley Bank. SVB marked the third largest bank failure in U.S. history and the largest since the 2008 financial crisis. And yet not a single federal regulator was held to account. In fact, the FDIC filed a lawsuit against bank executives which accused the SVB of egregious mismanagement. And I agree. How is it that no bank supervisor has faced any consequences? With 30 MRAs and MRIAs that never had timely action at SVB. How can the people who are supposed to be our cops on the beat have not faced any recourse for such egregious failures? I simply don't understand. We must all address the fact that over the last 4 years, the Biden administration and Bidenomics have devastated, decimated, and destroyed hardworking families' ability to support themselves. During Joe Biden's time in office, overall prices rose by over 20%. Energy prices, 34%. Transportation costs, 31%. Groceries, 22%. But that's not all. For the folks working paycheck to paycheck, Joe Biden broke our economy, and Donald Trump will fix it. For too long, bank regulators have followed a black box regulatory framework with little to no recourse. The FDIC, under President Trump's leadership, recently released never-before-seen supervisory documents which confirmed that Biden's Operation Choke Point 2.0 was real, despite assurances that these unacceptable practices would end following the Democrats' first Operation Choke Point 1.0. We are seeing an unfair playing field that results in disastrous consequences for legal businesses and law-abiding citizens.
Yeah, it looks like I'm having stream issues all over the place. What is going on tonight? What is going on? What is the current speed? 220 megabits. Holy cow. 830 megabits. All right, so it's not the speed. 740 megabit. What is going on? Bear with me, folks. Something's not quite adding up here. Yeah, so he's getting into those data points already very early on that I want more and more people to speak about. Everyone just talks about, look at GDP growth, and whatever, but what does that really mean to you individually? Is that really going to make a difference in your life? Right? I mean, for the lion's share of people, that's not really going to move the needle for them. What they're really after are those data points that matter to them as an individual and as a family. So when there's tax reductions, are those beneficial to the middle class, which Trump's tax cuts 100% were. We could talk about that a little bit. Everybody always says like, oh, his tax cuts went to the, wealthiest, the billionaires. It was a billionaire tax cut, which not the case. It helped everybody. And it disproportionately helped the folks that were at the bottom of the social class structure.
Powell, I look forward to hearing from you on the Federal Reserve's future and the plans that you have for right-sizing the financial regulatory framework, specifically around Basel III. To create jobs here in America, we need to make sure there's capital and liquidity in the market. And we also want all Americans, even those growing up in poverty like I did, to know that they can access the capital necessary to start new businesses, grow existing businesses, buy a home, and pursue their American dream. Chairman, I look forward to your comments and your testimony. I will simply say that I believe that weaponizing an independent agency like the Fed for liberal positions, from debanking crypto, bank stress test, and the green financing scheme, is not calling balls and strikes as a fair referee. And I hope that we are getting ready to clean that slate, start afresh, and focus on a healthy economy. Ranking Member Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chair Powell, it is no secret that you and I disagree on the need for strong bank regulation, on monetary policy, and on the Fed's stock trading scandals. We have sharp differences, but I believe you are a principled public servant who cares about this country. We are at an unprecedented moment. Our financial systems are facing huge risks from the economic chaos of President Trump and his co-president, Elon Musk. From on-again, off-again tariffs to on-again, off-again layoffs for tens of thousands of government workers, to on-again, off-again cuts in domestic grain purchases, to on-again, off-again support for medical research. Now, co-president Musk and his OMB director have frozen all work at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. There are now 0 cops overseeing the $18 trillion consumer lending market. 0 cops. Investigations into illegal foreclosures and auto repossessions canceled. Exams of giant credit card issuers to weed out unlawful junk fees canceled. Probes of illegal debt collection practices canceled. Rules to save people billions of dollars canceled. If Musk and his OMB director succeed in killing the CFPB, it's like putting a sign on every checking account, every credit card, every mortgage application, and every car loan. Cops have been fired. Let the scams begin. That is not all. Musk and his Doge crew are also rooting through the Treasury's most important payment systems, the financial plumbing that ensures that billions of payments go through, from Social Security checks to grants for community health centers. No one has verified how they got this access or what they are doing with it. No one has checked whether Americans' financial data has been copied or sold for the personal profit of Mr. Musk. Instead, we've had a series of misleading and conflicting statements by Treasury Secretary Bessent. After receiving public blowback, it appears that Secretary Bessent is now trying to throw the Federal Reserve under the bus. Secretary Bessent claims that Doge can't meddle with the Treasury's payment systems because ultimately the Fed is in control. Now, I'm not sure whether Secretary Bessent doesn't understand how the system works or if he's just trying to shift the blame to you. But I know he is wrong. The Fed simply executes the transactions that Treasury instructs. If Elon and his hackers, for example, initiate instructions to choke off payments to their enemies, or if they issue instructions to shut down payment for teachers' aides for kids with special needs, the Fed may have no way of knowing.
That is like oddly specific. If Elon Musk decides to cut off payments to teachers' assistants and kids with special needs, it's like bizarre. Like if he decides to do that, folks, then no one's there to check that. Like what?
That the instructions were manipulated and the Fed may have no legal method to override them. Chair Powell, the next 18 months may define your legacy and the country's trust in the Fed as an institution. I expect that you will work with Democrats and Republicans in Congress if Doge's next move is to try to commandeer the Fed's payment system. I also expect that you will not join the conspiracy to shutter the CFPB. Unlike the Treasury payment instructions, you can see if the CFPB's funding requests have been manipulated. I understand that some extremists have a different view about what the law ought to be.
Ike, I appreciate your thoughts there in the chat. I'm just going to read your comment there. Once again, firing 17 inspector generals is not a good thing. I don't believe it's the case that they would not backfill those roles. I think of it, and this is just my perspective, interested in folks kind of sharing their thoughts. I think of it as look at the waste they have found in just 1 month. What levels of waste will they uncover into the indefinite future? Who are the people that are supposed to provide oversight? Perhaps these inspector generals. You're not doing a good job. You're fired. I don't see what's wrong with that equation.
But under the law right now, impoundment is clearly illegal. Do not make the Federal Reserve an accomplice to this illegal act and forever sully the reputation of the Fed. Keep the CFPB funded exactly as the law requires. We are in the middle of a crisis as Elon Musk tries to take over our government. But let's also talk for just a minute about your day-to-day job, meeting the Fed's dual mandate of promoting maximum employment and stable prices. It's now clear that the Fed acted too late and let inflation get too high, and then responded by keeping rates too high for too long. These policies made the big drivers of inflation, like housing costs, even worse. And they put Americans' jobs at risk, making it more difficult for them to afford a home and for small businesses to be able to finance their operations. I urge you to move more rapidly to bring down interest rates, beginning with a meaningful rate cut next month. You have.
All right. So, question that was put out there: examples of the inefficiencies. Let's just play my favorite press secretary's commentary on that topic. Let's get that out here. One sec while it loads up, y'all. And you'll see. I mean, this is all tip of the iceberg. What we see right now, it like seriously is. It's just literally the tip of the iceberg. Yeah, Warren's just... I don't understand Warren. It's like she says the opposite of where she stood, say, 10, 15 years ago when she was getting going, right? All right. So let's have Caroline come out here and tell us how it is. Hang on one second. We just need her to pull out her paper. Where's the paper?
To have reportedly committed in this country. It's the
Come on.
agreed to the you guys on that. When it comes to the federal look, because if you look at the waste and abuse that has run through USAID over the past several years, these are some of the insane priorities that organization has been spending money on. $1.5 million to advance DEI in Serbia's workplaces, $70,000 for a production of a DEI musical in Ireland, $47,000 for a transgender opera in Colombia, $32,000 for a transgender comic book in Peru, I don't know about you, but as an American taxpayer, I don't want my dollars going towards this crap, and I know the American people don't either, and that's exactly what Elon Musk has been tasked by President Trump to do, to get the fraud, waste, and abuse out of our federal government. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, so she just dropped the mic right there. Knew exactly when she had made her point and, left the media speechless, more or less. I know some of them started mumbling in the background, but it was more like a but what about, wait, hold on, what? But I mean, that's the kind of stuff that you scratch your head. Like, why exactly are we? I don't care what kind of opera it is. I know they mentioned some buzzwords that, excuse me. Excuse me, guys. I know they mentioned some buzzwords that are sensitive. It's not the subject of the night that I want to dive into. But regardless, why am I funding as a taxpayer a comic book to be created in another country? Why is that so important, right? Why fund an opera to be created somewhere else? Should we not fund some opera to be, done here in the United States? And I'm not trying to get into the content of that, but it's just the idea of there's so much funding of, like, let's just say arts or other things that are not productive to the U.S. If you really wanted to be altruistic and say that we're elevating the standard of living of other countries, then let's build those all the well water facilities and everything else, and let's get their standard of living up. But once that's in place, it's there. It's good. It's like a one-time investment. We don't need to have this continuing budget of, like, on an annual basis, we're going to spend $1 trillion on, I know it's a $40 billion budget for the USAID group, but I just mean, generally speaking, you don't want to spend massive amounts of money to continue doing something just because that's how much you've spent historically. And all of this is just tip of the iceberg. That was just one clip that I remembered off the top of my head that she did a nice job kind of silencing the press that was, pushing questions on her. But that's just, again, tip of the iceberg. The list goes on from here. There's so much. It's honestly ridiculous what they've uncovered in such a short amount of time. You go to the X platform, the Doge account. It starts to enumerate quite a bit of that type of stuff.
Proven you can move quickly when it is politically expedient. After President Trump was elected, within the space of just a few weeks, you scrubbed seemingly all mention of diversity and inclusion from the Fed's website. You withdrew from an international central bank group that shares information on climate-related risks to the financial system. You instituted a hiring freeze that will limit the number of cops on the Wall Street beat, and you announced plans to gut big bank stress tests. I can see the immediate political appeal of your strategy, but ultimately it will fail. You will lose good people. Climate catastrophes will continue to mount, and the increasing vulnerability.
All right, I'm going to jump back and forth. Great discussion points, great topics being brought up in the chat. I really appreciate that, guys, for the engagement there. I'm just going to bring up my X account. I just got to find my little meme that I published recently. Where's my meme? Yeah, I like this one. Eagle chasing Taylor. All right, where did it go? Hello. Hello, can't be that hard to find. Come on. All right, so here we go. Right here, okay? And this is my talking point. USAID feeds 10 babies around the world for a total of $40 billion. And people are like, but the government should do this, that. And the answer is like, no, I don't, start over. The level of inefficiency is astonishing. Like, yeah, they do have a segment where they're providing food, essentials to folks around the world. But should it really cost that much? What's going on with that money? There is a need to put a pause and rethink how we're doing things and do it effectively and efficiently. I mean, if we didn't cut that budget, let's say we kept it the same, $40 billion, and I actually don't know what the long-term approach is going to be for that, but if it was kept the same and you got super efficient to where more benefit reached the people in need, wouldn't that be a good thing too, if it stayed? Like, we need to think in those terms. Why is it that we continue to throw money at the problems? I mean, that's the old adage. Like, you can't throw money, you can't throw money at every problem to solve it. But yet we approve of that with the government.
Ability of big banks will threaten our entire economy. Sure, Donald Trump may be happier with you right now, but wading deeper into politics to please him over the long run will burn the reputation and independence of the Fed and put our entire economy at risk. I urge you, don't fall into these traps. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, ma'am. Today we'll hear from Chair of the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell, on the semi-annual monetary policy report to Congress. Chair Powell, thank you for your testimony today, and you are now recognized.
Chairman Scott, Ranking Member Warren, and other members of the committee, I appreciate the opportunity to present the Federal Reserve's semi-annual monetary policy report. The Federal Reserve remains squarely focused on achieving our dual mandate goals of maximum employment and stable prices for the benefit of the American people.
And again, dual mandate, right? Full employment, stable prices. The gap that I've identified now is that they don't look at quality, just quantity of jobs. So what the heck does full employment really entail? It's something completely different than what we would necessarily want as far as an outcome.
The economy is strong overall and has made significant progress toward our goals over the past 2 years. Labor market conditions have cooled from their formerly overheated state and remain solid. Inflation has moved much closer to our 2% longer-run goal, though it remains somewhat elevated. We are attentive to the risks on both sides of our mandate. I will review the current economic situation before turning to monetary policy. Recent indicators suggest that economic activity has continued to expand at a solid pace. GDP rose 2.5% in 2024, bolstered by resilient consumer spending. Investment in equipment and intangibles appears to have declined in the fourth quarter, but was solid for the year overall. Following weakness in the middle of last year, activity in the housing sector seems to have stabilized. In the labor market, conditions remain solid and appear to have stabilized. Payroll job gains averaged 189,000 per month over the past 4 months. Following earlier increases, the unemployment rate has been steady now since the middle of last year, and at 4% in January remains low. Nominal wage growth has eased over the past year, and the jobs to workers gap has narrowed. Overall, a wide set of indicators suggests that conditions in the labor market are broadly in balance. The labor market is not a source of significant inflationary pressures. The strong labor market conditions in recent years have helped narrow long-standing disparities in employment and earnings across demographic groups. Inflation has eased significantly over the past 2 years, but remains somewhat elevated relative to our 2% longer-term goal. PCE prices rose 2.6% over the 12 months ending in December, and excluding the volatile food and energy categories, core PCE prices rose 2.8%. Longer-term inflation expectations appear to remain well anchored, as reflected in a broad range of surveys of households, businesses, and forecasters, as well as measures from financial markets. Our monetary policy actions are guided by our dual mandate to promote maximum employment and stable prices for the American people. Since last September, the FOMC lowered the policy rate by a full percentage point from its peak, after having maintained the target range for the federal funds rate at 5.25% to 5.5% for 14 months. That recalibration of our policy stance was appropriate in light of the progress on inflation and the cooling in the labor market. Meanwhile, we've continued to reduce our securities
Rewind
holdings.
real quick. Gotta hear that part again.
With our policy stance in maintain and stable prices for the American people. Since last September, the FOMC lowered the policy rate by a full percentage point from its peak, after having maintained the target range for the federal funds rate at 5.25% to 5.5% for 14 months. That recalibration of our policy stance was appropriate in light of the progress on inflation and the cooling in the labor market. Meanwhile, we've continued to reduce our securities holdings. With our policy stance now
All right, interesting. I got to look this up, the security holdings that they've reduced. What is that footprint exactly? Because remember, they bailed out General Motors. They did a lot of, oh gosh, I can't remember the insurers. There's some major insurers they did back in the financial crisis times. Were they still hanging on to those assets? Or is he talking about treasuries and specifically? I doubt it's the treasuries. Because at this point, who's going to want to buy those extremely low rate ones that they have to buy up? Richard, question: whom do I really work for? What am I really into? Hedge funds, come on out with it. You're no more MAGA than I. Whom do I really work for? I'm employed. I'm an employee somewhere. What am I really into? I'm assuming you're asking if I have some kind of angle with stuff. I just enjoy politics. I have a perspective. Like to hear other people express theirs and talk about it and not just recite what Fox News or what MSNBC and CNN are saying. So the dialogue that happens in chat. I don't have my my guest line open tonight, unfortunately, but at some point I would like to get guest callers jumping in. It's hard to. I don't know. Not as many people are willing to kind of dial in to have a direct discussion lately. I don't know if it's just like a post New Year's type thing. People are just getting tired of it, but I don't know. Hedge funds, come on out with it. I'm not part of any hedge fund, nothing like that at all. I do follow financial markets, crypto in particular, if you consider that a financial market.
Significantly less restrictive than it had been, and the economy remaining strong, we do not need to be in a hurry to adjust our policy stance. We know that reducing policy restraint too fast or too much could hinder progress on inflation. At the same time, reducing policy restraint too slowly or too little could unduly weaken economic activity and employment. In considering the extent and timing of additional adjustments to the target range for the federal funds rate, the FOMC will assess incoming data, the evolving outlook, and the balance of risks. As the economy evolves, we will adjust our policy stance in a manner that best promotes our maximum employment and price stability goals. If the economy remains strong and inflation does not continue to move sustainably toward 2%, we can maintain policy restraint for longer. If the labor market were to weaken unexpectedly or inflation were to fall more quickly than anticipated, we can ease policy accordingly. We are attentive to the risks on both sides of our dual mandate, and policy is well positioned to deal with the risks and uncertainties that we face. This year, we are conducting the second periodic review of our monetary policy strategy, tools, and communications, the framework used to pursue our congressionally mandated assigned goals of maximum employment and stable prices. The focus of this review is on the FOMC's Statement on Longer Run Goals and Monetary Policy Strategy, which articulates the committee's approach to monetary policy, and on the committee's policy communication tools. The committee's 2% longer run inflation goal will be retained and will not be a focus of the review. Our review will include outreach and public events involving a wide range of parties, including Fed Listens events around the country and a research conference in May. We will take on board lessons of the past 5 years and adapt our approach where appropriate to best serve the American people to whom we are accountable. We intend to wrap up the review by late summer. Let me conclude by emphasizing that at the Fed, we'll do everything we can to achieve our dual mandate goals that Congress has set for monetary policy. We remain committed to supporting maximum employment, bringing inflation sustainably to our 2% goal, and keeping longer-term inflation expectations well anchored. Our success in delivering on these goals matters to all Americans. We understand that our actions affect communities, families, and businesses across the country. Everything we do is in service to our public mission. Thank you. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Chairman Powell. Certainly your words and your actions have a global impact. You have the opportunity and responsibility of leading this country in the right direction economically, and I thank you for your commitment to having a conversation with all of us about how you do that well. You and I had a conversation yesterday. Some of it was frustrating, some of it was illuminating, but in the end, my goal is to make sure that the American people...
Richard Beck. So I was watching the chat on some of the other simulcasts to see if anything was popping up. But anyway, question there. I'm asking my line of work. You absolutely do have an agenda. Trump knows crypto like I can fly a space shuttle. I mean, I'm in the energy industry. Personally, that's what my day thing. This is just my little hobby here that I'm up to. That's my agenda. I am interested in what benefits me. I am interested in what benefits my family. I would like that to continue to improve and continue to grow, as I would hope everyone else feels the same way. Where our mutual self-interests overlap is what I'm hopeful we can kind of get to some consensus around and build, some common sets of understanding. But that's where I'm at. Trump can define tariff better than he can explain crypto. Everyone will talk someday, and I can't say I'm looking forward to All right, Richard. I hope your evening improves. Take care of yourself.
Specifically, those working paycheck to paycheck have more opportunities to succeed, not fewer. You have said that the Fed is not against innovation, and banks are perfectly able to serve crypto customers as long as they understand and can manage the risks. Yet you have admitted that the threshold has been a little higher for banks engaging in crypto activities. Last week, I held a hearing on debanking and once again heard that federal banking agencies, in particular the Fed, use reputational risk as a tool to encourage the debanking of certain legal industries and law-abiding citizens for political reasons not tied to safety and soundness. Debanking is a top priority for this committee, and it certainly is for me, and one that I believe is a bipartisan issue. Will you commit to working with this committee to end debanking, including working with the new Vice Chair of Supervision, once appointed, to revise the Federal Reserve supervision manuals to remove reputational risk as a tool to weigh in on political topics?
I'm happy to make that commitment.
Thank you, sir. Accountability is very important. I would like to think accountability is a priority for everyone, especially the Fed, given that failures in Fed supervision can result in the loss of billions of dollars. Yet following the failure of the Silicon Valley Bank, which was in part due to the failures of its regulators to identify egregious mismanagement of interest rate and liquidity risks, we have yet to see any regulators be held accountable. And as you recall, that was a point of my frustration. As a guy who spent a lot of time in the private sector, 15 years running a few businesses, I can tell you that accountability is a necessary part of making the entire organization healthier and perform its job as well as possible. I'm encouraged that the FDIC has begun the process of holding SVB executives accountable. That's good news. But no Fed employee has been fired, put on probation, put on performance improvement plan, all of which would be expected in the private sector, as I just mentioned, for employee failure. Please explain to me why Fed employees are held to a different standard from my perspective than everyone else, and what are you planning to do to take accountability for Fed failures in supervision?
So we've actually done quite a lot in response to the events associated with Silicon Valley Bank. So we've done many, many things. In terms of specific accountability, what we found was this was not a case of malfeasance or nonfeasance so much. It was a case of people were carrying out a specific playbook that failed to cause us to act in time for these things. So it wasn't actually particularly fair to the employees to say you violated our practices in some way. That wasn't really what happened. What happened was, I would say, a lot of focus on process and on governance and controls, and not enough focus on basic bread and butter banking, credit risk, liquidity risk, interest rate risk, things like that. So as we discussed yesterday, we took very substantial steps to avoid further spread of those issues, and that was successful. But I understand your point on accountability.
This is one of the areas where you see the approach to looking at safety and soundness, and with the number of MRAs that went really documented, but no action was taken, that leads me to the conclusion that individual employees, supervisors, should have been held for that. I'll move on, though. In the past, you've supported tailoring regulations so that we ensure banks of different sizes thrive and to preserve our diverse banking system. Will you commit to working with me as chairman to make sure that financial regulations do not impose more burden than is necessary? I'll say that this comes after a number of conversations with community banks and regional banks that have continued to stress that the cost of the regulatory framework around them isn't just harsh, it's oppressive. Larger banks suggest that the cost per employee for the regulatory framework is $10,000 per employee. I think we can do better and would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Right, first of all, I will commit to working with you on that. We do try to avoid excessive burden. I think it's fair to take a fresh look on, frankly, on debanking. I think we all see, both in your hearing and in the one on the House side, we hear a lot of people talking about that. And, it's time to take a fresh look, I think. We don't intentionally do these things, but sometimes regulation leads things to happen, and we need to be working on that.
I appreciate that, and I'll turn it over to the ranking member. I'll say this. After having a number of conversations with CEOs of banks around the country, one of the things that was made clear to me was specific statement from the CEOs is that the regulatory OCC and other regulatory agencies said specifically to debank certain industries, and that is the point that I'm making, and one that I think we have to solve. If it's legal in America to do business, we should do our part to make sure that they're banked.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So over the weekend, Co-President Musk and Acting Director Vogt effectively shut down the CFPB. No more cop on the beat looking out for a family of 4 in South Carolina facing an illegal foreclosure. No more cop on the beat looking out for your grandma whose bank account has just been taken over by a scammer. No more cop on the beat looking out for people getting ripped off by giant credit card companies that are charging illegal junk fees. It also means that the CFPB is no longer doing one of its most important jobs, examining big banks to root out illegal conduct before it happens, or at least stop it before more people get hurt. Chair Powell, if the CFPB isn't on the job right now, then who is administering JP Morgan or Wells Fargo's consumer compliance exam?
A couple of things to note. The CFPB, I think, is I don't know what the right term is, an agency or a part of the Federal Reserve System. And the funding that the Federal Reserve gives to it is not subject to approval by Congress. So when you see those areas where there's gaps in terms of oversight, transparency, so forth, that seems to be where DOGE is kind of hitting first. I'm guessing these are obvious ones that have been glaring out there for a long time. So they'll hit those until they start uncovering other spots in government, which, of course, is a massive, massive budget. But that's why, in my view, they're going after it here first. Well, I mean, among the first ones.
To ensure that they are following the law.
Senator, I believe that, and you would know, that Dodd-Frank moved all authority for examinations in the consumer space to the CFPB. We still have some jurisdiction.
We'll talk about that in a sec. But the answer to my question, please. If the CFPB is not there examining these giant banks to make sure they are following the laws on not cheating consumers, who is doing that job?
I can say no other federal regulator.
No one, in other words. So thanks to Co-President Musk and CFPB Acting Director Vogt, Wall Street banks no longer have to show the bank examiners that they're not illegally opening accounts people didn't ask for, like happened with Wells Fargo, or charging illegal junk fees like the Bank of America did. But CFPB has jurisdiction only on banks that have more than $10 billion in assets. So what's happening in thousands of community banks all around the country, those that have less than $10 billion in assets? So, Chair Powell, as you know, the Fed oversees consumer compliance for state member banks that have less than $10 billion in assets. Has the Fed suspended consumer compliance exams for those smaller banks, or is the Fed still on the job to make sure that those smaller banks are following consumer financial laws.
Still on the job, business as usual.
All right. By forcing the CFPB not to do its job, President Trump, Elon.
I mean, she thinks he's onto something here. Let's see where this goes. She's like, gave a little smile and everything, like, oh, I'm gonna get him with a good one here.
Elon Musk and the author of Project 2025, Russ Vogt, are giving Wall Street banks an unlimited get-out-of-jail-free card so they can cheat working families, even while community banks continue to play by the rules. You know, for any Americans who have money deposited at JP Morgan or Wells Fargo or any other of the giant banks, they should now know that there is no one on the job to make sure that those banks are not scamming you. Only the smaller banks now have a cop on the beat to make sure that they aren't cheating consumers. You know, if I had my money in one of those giant banks, I might think about going to a smaller bank where the protection, at least right now, is a whole lot better. Now, at the same time that the CFPB is under attack, the Fed is buckling to pressure from Wall Street to erase other safeguards for the too big to fail banks. During the first Trump administration, under your leadership, the Fed weakened the big bank stress tests, including by giving the big banks some of the answers to the test in advance. I called you out on it, but you promised right here in this.
Answers? What test is she talking about? The answers to the stress test? Like, do you have enough capital? Are you capitalized to the appropriate ratios? Like, let's see.
Committee that you would not give those banks the whole answer key. I'm going to quote you back. You said complete knowledge of the models could lead to a model monoculture in which all firms have similar internal stress testing models, which could increase the correlation of risk in the system and miss key idiosyncratic risks faced by the firms. I agreed with you. But several weeks ago, the Fed announced that it has plans to do exactly that, hand all of the answers over to the giant banks. Chair Powell, why is the Fed about to propose a rule that directly contradicts your own testimony and, in your own words, would render the stress tests toothless?
Senator, in essence, because the ground has shifted very substantially in administrative law, and we actually want the stress test to remain resilient to that, and so we're making changes to accomplish that.
Well, the changes are changes you've identified earlier as making those tests toothless. Look, the big banks are going to juice shareholder payouts and leave this economy more vulnerable to a crash. The Fed is knuckling under to bank lobbyists. We know how this ends. People will suffer. Wall Street will get bailed out. I urge you, Chair Powell, to serve Main Street instead of Wall Street. Don't weaken these rules.
Thank you. Senator Rounds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Chairman, thank you for coming before the committee. I appreciate the opportunity.
All right, I'm not sure where she was going with that. She was running out of time. Just honestly sounded more like a rant than anything to me. But this guy now coming up, my favorite senator, he needs to be your favorite senator. If you're a fan of Kennedy's, like and subscribe.
Senator, to visit with you. I've got a series of questions, but I would like to give you an opportunity.
Doggone
if
it, it's not
you
Kennedy
would like.
next. I got it wrong.
The suggestion that the ranking member has made here is that the big banks can now scam individuals right now. Any change in the laws regarding how they're supposed to be treating the individual consumers out there or anything along that line?
Law changes? No, I'm not aware of any
Any
law
changes in any rules that they would have to follow?
Not that I'm aware of.
Are they still audited, and do they still have the regulators in watching all of their businesses just as they did before?
Well, they'd have all the regulators except for the CFPB.
Very good.
If in fact, in the hypothetical, the CFPB weren't carrying that out.
Anything else you'd like to add before we move on?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As we continue to prioritize the stability and the resilience of our financial system, the ongoing Basel III rulemaking process has remained front and center in shaping our regulatory framework. Now, I guess I was rather outspoken with my opposition to the original proposal and further work was stalled at the end of the last year. I guess my question for you today, sir, is could you provide an update on the Federal Reserve's progress in finalizing the Basel III Endgame rulemaking process?
I'd be glad to. So we remain committed to completing Basel III Endgame. We think it's good for U.S. banks. It's good for our economy that there be a global standard beneath which foreign banks can't fall. And that was one of the big ideas behind the whole Basel Committee approach. So where it sits now is we await leadership arriving at the OCC and the FDIC, and that seems to be happening. And when that happens, we're going to sit down with them and work our way through to a Basel III Endgame proposal. And I think we can do this reasonably quickly, one that is compliant, consistent with the Basel requirements, and also consistent with what other large jurisdictions are doing. I'm optimistic that we can do that fairly quickly, and we're committed to doing that.
We always wanted our banks to be competitive with European banks. And I'm just curious, the original proposal that was in front of you, and I'd like your thoughts on this, it was estimated to increase our bank's capital by 19%, which I think may very well have created a potential disadvantage within the U.S. institutions versus our European counterparts. With any new proposal, what's your thoughts? Would you make a commitment that this would be a neutral approach with regard to capital?
The main commitment I'll make is we'll work together with new leadership at the other banking agencies to do something. But that's certainly, you know, I've said many times in this committee that I think that the level of capital in the largest banks is about right, and so it'll shake out somewhere in that area. I would guess. Our
expectation would be, and the markets would expect that it would be neutral with regard to capital
in that range. But I want to defer to our new colleagues and get their views as well. But that's a good starting place.
Okay, thank you. The Federal Reserve's partnership with the U.S. Treasury plays a central role in supporting our nation's payment infrastructure, which processes a vast range of daily transactions.
All right, you're going to see who the next Democrat is here. Might have a little bit more of an exciting exchange.
On what was a very large amount of interest.
Oh.
Chairman Powell, thank you, and thank you always for the conversations in between these hearings as well. Let me focus on a couple of things of concern, and you touched on a little bit of this, and I think this is important to clarify. There was a change in the law when the CFPB was created. The CFPB examines the banks and enforces the law, whereas the Fed only supervises those banks. Is that correct? Or how would you determine that relationship?
With the CFPB? So Dodd-Frank took a lot of the consumer compliance jurisdiction away from the other banking agencies and gave it to a newly created agency, the CFPB. We retained a residual amount of that, as we just discussed, which was banks under $10 billion in assets. But the CFPB essentially took all of that when Dodd-Frank came into being.
So as it was created, when you two were working together, the Federal Reserve collaborated with the Consumer Bureau when supervising those large banks, correct?
Yes, we still retain supervision over all the holding inflation.
Have we experienced a hard landing?
No, we sure
Are
haven't.
we in a recession?
All right,
Just
here we go.
experts
The OG
to the big
of
bank.
the Senate.
I don't know when that'll happen. And
Kennedy's
even when
coming
it
up
does
now.
happen, we're still going to have a housing
Some good
shortage
stuff.
in many places.
Thank you. Chairman Powell, thank you again for being here.
Thank you, ma'am. Next will be Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for being here.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
My friend, our ranking member, said that you are knuckling under to the big bank lobbyists. Is that true?
No.
It seems to me that the big picture should not go unnoticed. Do you recall a year or two ago when inflation was raging? I think its peak was about 9%. Many economists and other experts based in part on history, said that you were going to have to provoke high unemployment and put our country into recession in order to get inflation down. Do you recall that?
Very, very well.
Are we in a recession?
We are not.
Would you, as an American, trade places right now with Germany in terms of the economy?
No, I sure wouldn't.
How about China?
No, wouldn't trade places.
How about France?
No, thanks.
Things aren't perfect. Inflation's obviously still sticky, and long rates are too high, which I want to talk about in a second. But the fact is, knock on wood, we have experienced a soft landing, haven't we?
Not for me to say, really. I'll let others
Well, have
make
we
that.
experienced a hard landing?
No, we sure
Are
haven't.
we in a recession?
No, we're not.
I call that a soft landing. And it seems to me that you and some of the ladies and gentlemen who are your colleagues at the Federal Reserve behind you deserve some credit for that.
Thank you.
I don't know why you don't take the credit. Everybody else in Washington, D.C. does. Again, I'm not saying things are perfect, but I never imagined that our landing could be this soft, albeit not perfect. And I wanted to thank you and your colleagues for that effort. You sure didn't get any help from Congress and on the and our president on the fiscal side. I don't expect you to comment on that. You and the Federal Reserve can to a large extent control short rates, can't you?
Yes.
Through the Open Market Committee. You can't control long rates, though, can you?
No, we can't.
Why is that?
So a lot of things go into long rates, and one of them is the expected future short rate of Fed policy, but many, many other things go in. Expectations of inflation in the longer run, the sort of risks around the economy and around the budget deficit go into something called the term premium, which is the part we can't explain when we do these decompositions. And so, you know, it's set by supply and demand in the bond market at the long end, and we're not particularly. We have some influence, but mostly not.
Many Americans are looking at short rates and looking at the Fed's behavior and how you reduce inflation, but they don't seem they don't see the long rates going down, and obviously that affects mortgage rates. And I would encourage you and your colleagues to spend some time explaining to the American people why that is. Final question. If you went home tonight and Mayor Powell, your spouse, said, you know, I got a call today from our bank, and they're debanking us. They're worried about their reputational risk because they don't like our politics. Would you think that fair?
No, I sure wouldn't. And as I mentioned earlier, I too am troubled by the quantity of these reports, and you know, really want to understand better why this is happening. You know, one theory is that banks are just very risk averse around BSA and money laundering, and that's because we're so tough on them, and that they just don't. Any red flag is enough. But it may be that this whole thing with reputation risk needs to be thought about. It's actually coming out of our one manual that we used. We're taking that concept out, the manual that we've been using for for account access for master accounts. We're just going to take that out. But I think this needs a fresh look, and I think it's time for that, and we're going to do that.
Well, I've asked our chairman, and he has agreed to invite some of the CEOs of some of the banks that have been debanking people. The CEOs,
Yes.
not their lawyers, not their PR consultants,
Not the lobbyists.
not their priests, them, the CEOs to come in and let's talk about this and find out what the hell's been going on.
Thank you, Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Reed.
Thank you, Chairman Scott. Chairman Powell, welcome. Thank you very much. I think your monetary policy combined with the Biden fiscal policy over the last 4 years has made a tremendous difference. We've avoided
All right, this
a
is getting a
recession.
little slow.
And I'd like to
A little
remind
slow here.
people.
See if we can get some fun. That's right. No,
Mr. Chairman, obviously there's been a lot of conversation both in and out of this hearing room today. Conversations about a co-president referencing Elon Musk, referencing the work that Doge is doing. I think it's important to remember that President Trump ran on this. I mean, he said we're going to look for wasteful spending across our government. We're $36 trillion in debt, y'all. That's not only fiscally irresponsible, it is actually morally irresponsible. And the difference in this administration and the last administration is that President Trump is actually the final arbiter. And it's interesting that none of you had anything to say over the last 4 years when it is clear that our commander-in-chief was not in command. And if we're going to use the term co-president, then let's go back and say co-president Jake Sullivan, co-president Ron Klain, co-president Jill Biden. I mean, it seems that some of the biggest decisions were made during the president's afternoon nap time. And so I just think we need to be a little bit more honest about what's been laid out and what's actually occurring. Chair Powell,
She's looking at her.
I want to discuss
Senator sitting
some
next to her.
monetary policy issues, but I first want to highlight a few supervisory items. We unfortunately started 2023 with several bank failures in which the Fed itself admits
back to
its
Silicon Valley Bank.
Administration think
Of what direct
And
Private
also
insurance,
Doge.
you're seeing
to actually end.
Chicago region ability intel
information.
Decisions made by policymakers, correct?
yes.
So it's a little disingenuous to be hear my colleagues talk about how they care so much about inflation when in reality they cause it. But I don't want
Try to favor or to hurt any political party, any political figure. Just focus on the data. If we start putting up political filters, we'll encounter the role at everybody at the Fed. It's
Charging people illegally.
easy to identify with any
All right, let's see
accuracy
boring.
exactly where costs do fall, but I think it'd be hard to guarantee any particular outcome. I think we're just going to have to see.
Great, thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Warren, did you?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to make a point before we quit here, and that is about law enforcement. If you keep the laws the same on the books, but you fire the cops, you're going to have a lot more crime. That's kind of law enforcement 101. And the problem we've got right now is law in the books about consumer protection hasn't changed. But the cops, at least right at this moment, have been told at CFPB to stand down. And I appreciate that we have state AGs who step in, and often they partner up with the CFPB. But there is no one else for the giant banks who actually does what's called the bank examination, the supervision. And that is so important. Remember the Wells Fargo scandal, where Wells Fargo was illegally opening fake accounts in people's names? You find that through bank examination, not because the person who got cheated could figure it out. Bank of America gets hauled in because bank examiners discovered they were charging people illegally on junk fees. Nobody finds that but the people who are down in the banks doing the bank examination on behalf of the consumers. Look, we tried a patchwork of law enforcement for consumers before 2008. We had all those laws scattered among 7 different agencies, and we saw how it ended. It ended with millions of people losing their homes, millions of people losing their jobs, millions of people losing their savings. The CFPB is our law enforcement agency to make sure that the giant banks follow the rules on consumer protection. And for me, right now, I'd be really worried about doing business with a giant bank when there's no cop on the beat?
Thank you, Senator. I will recognize myself for just one question, and it'll even be relevant to your job, I promise, Mr. Chairman. So thank you for your patience and for being here. I wanted to follow up on there were some questions, or at least I know Senator Rounds asked a Basel III question, and your response was basically, let's get the people in place from the administration, and then we'll proceed again.
All right, we're going to flip over to Trump doing more Doge things. Let's get this going.
IQ. He's a high IQ individual.
And he's got this, check out this cool chain he's got.
So thank you very much. We had a busy day today. The king just left, and we've had a great discussion, terrific discussion concerning Gaza and everything else. We had discussions also about Saturday at 12 o'clock. It's going to be a big moment. We'll see what happens. I don't expect much happening with these people, but we'll see what happens. And we're going to be signing a very important deal today. It's Doge, and I'm going to ask Elon to tell you a little bit about it and some of the things that we found, which are shocking. Billions and billions of dollars in waste, fraud, and abuse. And I think it's very important. And that's one of the reasons I got elected. I said, we're going to do that. Nobody had any idea it was that bad, that sick, and that corrupt. And it seems hard to believe that judges want to try and stop us from looking for corruption, especially when we found hundreds of millions of dollars worth, much more than that, in just a short period of time. And we want to weed out the corruption. And it seems hard to believe that a judge could say, we don't want you to do that. Well, so maybe we have to look at the judges, because that's a very serious, I think it's a very serious violation. I'll ask Elon Musk to say a few words, and we'll take some questions. Elon, go ahead.
Sure. So at a high level, if you say, what is the goal of Doge, and I think a significant part of the presidency is to restore democracy. This may seem like, well, aren't we in a democracy? Well, if you don't have a feedback loop, FAX, we would have to, if you it's all right. So, I tell you, gravitas can be difficult sometimes. If there's not a good feedback loop from the people to the government, and if you have rule of the bureaucrat, or if the bureaucracy is in charge, and then what meaning does democracy actually have? If the people cannot vote and have their will be decided by their elected representatives in the form of the president and the Senate and the House, then we don't live in a democracy. We live in a bureaucracy. So it's incredibly important that we close that feedback loop, we fix that feedback loop, and that the public's elected representatives, the president, the House, and the Senate, decide what happens, as opposed to a large unelected bureaucracy. This is not to say that there are good people who are in the federal bureaucracy, but you can't have an autonomous federal bureaucracy. You have to have one that is responsive to the people. That's the whole point of a democracy. And if you looked at if you looked at the founders today and said, what do you think of the way things have turned out? Well, we have this unelected, fourth unconstitutional branch of government, which is the bureaucracy, which has, in a lot of ways, currently more power than any elected representative. And this is not something that people want, and it does not match the will of the people. So it's just something we've got to fix. And then we've also got to address the deficit. So we've got a $2 trillion deficit, and if we don't do something about this deficit, the country's going bankrupt. I mean, it's really astounding that the interest payments alone on the national debt exceed the Defense Department budget, which is shocking, because we spend a lot of money on defense. But if that just keeps going, we're essentially going to bankrupt the country. So what I really want to say is, like, it's not optional for us to reduce the federal expenses. It's essential. It's essential for America to remain solvent as a country, and it's essential for America to have the resources necessary to provide things to its citizens and not simply be servicing vast amounts of debt.
And also, could you mention some of the things that your team has found, some of the crazy numbers, including the woman that walked away with about 30 million,
right,
etc.?
Well, we do find it sort of rather odd that there are quite a few people in the bureaucracy who have ostensibly a salary of a few $100,000, but somehow manage to accrue tens of millions of dollars in net worth while they are in that position, which is, what happened at USAID. We're just curious as to where it came from. Maybe they're very good at investing, in which case we should take their investment advice, perhaps. But just there seems to be mysteriously they get wealthy. We don't know why. Where does it come from? And I think the reality is that they're getting wealthy at the taxpayer expense. That's the honest truth of it. So, we're looking at, if you look at, say, Treasury, for example, basic controls that should be in place, that are in place in any company, such as making sure that any given payment has a payment categorization code, that there is a comment field that describes the payment, and that if a payment is on the do not pay list, that you don't actually pay it. None of those things are true currently. So the reason that departments can't pass audits is because the payments don't have a categorization code. It's like just a massive number of blank checks just flying out the building. So you can't reconcile blank checks. You've got comment fields that are also blank, so you don't.
The proof that Helmuth, appreciate your comment. The proof is, all of the scrutiny that's been put on Elon and the stop that the courts put on him from seeing transactional data in the treasury systems. That's where he's getting. He's getting directly from line item transactions that are happening in the U.S. Treasury that are very hard to link and connect to anything. And in some cases, they're not able to.
I don't know why the payment was made. And then we've got this truly absurd, a do not pay list, which can take up to a year for an organization to get on a do not pay list. And this, we're talking about terrorist organizations, we're talking about known fraudsters, known aspects of waste, known things that do not match any congressional appropriation, can take up to a year to get on the list. And even once on the list is not used. It's mind-blowing. So what we're talking about here, we're really just talking about adding common sense controls that should be present, that haven't been present. So you say, like, well, how could such a thing arise? That seems crazy. When you understand that really everything is geared towards complaint minimization, so then you understand the motivations. So if people receive money, they don't complain, obviously. But if people don't receive money, they do complain. And the fraudsters complain the loudest and the fastest. So then when you understand that, then it makes sense. Oh, that's why everything they approve all the payments at Treasury. Because if you approve all the payments, you don't get complaints. But now we're saying that, no, actually, we are going to complain. If money is spent badly, if your taxpayer dollars are not spent in a sensible and frugal manner, then that's not okay. Your tax dollars need to be spent wisely on things that matter to the people. I mean, these things, it's just common sense. It's not draconian or radical, I think. It's really just saying, let's look at each of these expenditures and say, is this actually in the best interest of the people? And if it is, it's approved. If it's not, we should think about it. So, there's crazy things like just cursory examination of Social Security, and we've got people in there that are 150 years old. Now, do you know anyone who's 150? I don't. Okay. They should be on the Guinness Book of World Records. They're missing out. So, that's a case where, I think they're probably dead. It's my guess. Or they should be very famous, one of the two. And then there's a whole bunch of Social Security payments where there's no identifying information. Well, why is there no identifying information? Obviously, we want to make sure that people who deserve to receive Social Security do receive it, and that they receive it quickly and accurately. I'll tell you another crazy thing. So, one of the things is we are trying to sort of right-size the federal bureaucracy, just make sure that this. Obviously, there need to be a lot of people working for the federal government, but not as many as currently. So we're saying, well, okay, if people can retire, with full benefits and everything, that would be good. They can retire, get their retirement payments, everything. And then we were told, this is actually, I think, a great anecdote, because we were told the most number of people that could retire possibly in a month is 10,000. We're like, well, why is that? Well, because all the retirement paperwork is manual on paper. It's manually calculated, then written down on a piece of paper. Then it goes down a mine. And like, what do you mean a mine? Like, yeah, there's a limestone mine where we store all the retirement paperwork. And you look at a picture of this mine. We'll post some pictures afterwards. And this mine looks like something out of the 50s because it was started in 1955. So it looks like it's like a time warp. And then the speed, the limiting factor is the speed at which the mine shaft elevator can move determines how many people can retire from the federal government. And the elevator breaks down sometimes, and then nobody can retire. Doesn't that sound crazy? There's like 1,000 people that work on this. So I think if we can take those people and say, like, you know what, instead of working in a mine shaft and carrying manila envelopes to, boxes in a mine shaft, you could do practically anything else. And you would add to the goods and services of the United States in a more useful way. So anyway, so I think, that's an example. Like at a high level, if you say, like, how do we increase prosperity, is we get people to shift from roles that are low to negative productivity to high productivity roles. And so you increase the total output of goods and services, which means that there's a higher standard of living available for everyone. That's the actual goal. Everyone's very quiet, by the way. So people normally this quiet?
Your detractors, Mr. Musk.
What?
Including a lot of Democrats.
I have detractors?
You do, sir.
I don't believe it.
Say that.
Hold on, folks. Got to adjust the audio a little bit. It's getting muted on my side for some reason. Got to bump this up slightly. Bear with me. But yeah, they did let him speak for quite some time, and it's unlike the media to not just jump in and throw questions around. Let's see what's going on. They're going to get something good here, I hope.
You're orchestrating a hostile takeover of government and doing it in a non-transparent way. What's your response to that criticism?
Well, first of all, you couldn't ask for a stronger mandate from the public. The public voted. We have a majority of the public voting for President Trump. We won the House. We won the Senate. The people voted for major government reform. There should be no doubt about that. That was on the campaign. The president spoke about that at every rally. The people voted for major government reform, and that's what people are going to get. They're going to get what they voted for. And a lot of times, people that don't get what they voted for, but in this presidency, they are going to get what they voted for. And that's what democracy is all about.
Mr. Musk, the White House says that you will identify and excuse yourself from any conflicts of interest that you may have. Does that mean that you are, in effect, policing yourself? What are the checks and balances that are in place to ensure that there is accountability and transparency?
Well, we actually are trying to be as transparent as possible. In fact, we post our actions to the Doge handle on X and to the Doge website. So all of our actions
I saw a question about the stuttering, like what's up with that. Musk has come out in the past about having Asperger's, and that is an element of it, whether it's public speaking or just in general. You get kind of excited and your mind is going a million miles a second. The stuttering comes along with that. I don't know if it's in all cases or not, but I read just real quick that it is something that is accompanied with that. But of course, there's folks with speech impediments and so forth that are going on. Anyway, not much more to read into it than that.
Are maximally transparent. In fact, I don't think there's been, I don't know of a case where an organization has been more transparent than the Doge organization. So, and the kind of things we're doing are, I think, very, very simple and basic. They're not, what I mentioned, for example, about Treasury, just making sure that payments that go out, taxpayer money that goes out, is categorized correctly, that the payment is explained, that organizations on the do not pay list, which takes a lot to get there, that actually are not paid, which currently they are paid. These are not individual judgment decisions. These are about simply having sensible checks and balances in the system itself to ensure that taxpayer money is spent well. So it's got nothing to do with, like, say, a contract with some company of mine at all.
But if there is a conflict of interest when it comes to you yourself, for instance, you've received billions of dollars in federal contracts. When it comes to the Pentagon, for instance, which the president I know has directed you to look into, are you policing yourself in that? Is there any sort of accountability check and balance in place that would provide any transparency for the American people?
Well, all of our actions are fully public. So if you see anything, you say, like, wait a second, hey, Elon, that seems like maybe that's, there's a conflict there. It's not like people are going to be shy about saying that. They'll say it immediately,
Including you yourself.
Yes. But transparency is what builds trust, not simply somebody asserting trust. So not somebody saying they're trustworthy, but transparency, so you can see everything that's going on. And then you can see, am I doing something that benefits?
And so one of the things that I'm trying to petition out there is to have Doge make all of this data that which should be public data. I mean, don't make the personal sensitive data available. We don't need to know people's individual names and stuff like that. But budget allocations for different topics, different programs, projects, parts of government, even the contracts going to SpaceX. Well, let's make all of that public and let's just crowdsource it, right? He's doing a good job with the crew that he has that's basically sleeping on the floor in various agencies, going through all the data. But make that data public. Let the public help crowdsource, what areas may need to be cut, looked into, or so forth.
It's one of my companies or not. It's totally obvious.
And if we thought that, we would not let him do that segment or look in that area if we thought there was a lack of transparency or a conflict of interest. And we watch that also. He's a big businessman. He's a successful guy. That's why we want him doing this. We don't want an unsuccessful guy doing this. Now, one thing also that Elon hasn't really mentioned are the groups of people that are getting some of these payments. They're ridiculous. And we're talking about billions of dollars that we've already found. We found fraud and abuse. I would say those two words as opposed to the third word that I usually use, but in this case, fraud and abuse. It's abusive because most of these things are virtually made up, or certainly money shouldn't be sent to them. And you know what I'm talking about. It's crazy. So, but we're talking about tens of billions of dollars that we've already found. And now a judge who's an activist judge wants to try and stop us from doing this. Why? Why would they want to do that? I campaigned on this. I campaigned on the fact that I said government is corrupt. And it is very corrupt. It's very, very, it's also foolish. As an example, a man has a contract for 3 months and the contract ends, but they keep paying him for the next 20 years, because nobody ends a contract. You get a lot of that. You have a contract that's a 3-month contract. Now, normally, if you're in a small, in all fairness, it's the size of this thing is so big.
Yeah.
But if you have a contract and you're in a regular business, you end the contract in 3 months. It's a consultant. Here's a contract for 3 months, but it goes on for 20 years. And the guy doesn't say that he got money for 20 years. They don't say it. They just keep getting checks month after month, and you have various things like that, and even much worse than that, actually, much worse. And I guess you call that incompetence, maybe.
Yeah.
It could be corruption. It could be deals made on both sides, where the guy gets the money, he kicks. I think there's a lot of kickback here. I see a lot of kickback here.
There's a lot of kickbacks.
A tremendous kickback, because nobody could be so stupid to give out some of these contracts, so he has to get a kickback. So that's what I got elected for, that and borders and military and a lot of things, but this is a big part of it. And I hope that the court system is going to allow us to do what we have to do. We got elected to among other things, find all of this fraud, abuse, all of this horrible stuff going on. And we've already found billions of dollars, not like a little bit, billions, many billions of dollars. And when you get down to it, it's going to be probably close to $1 trillion. It could be close to $1 trillion that we're going to find. That will have quite an impact on the budget. And you'll go to a judge where they handpick a judge, and he has certain leanings. I'm not knocking anybody for that, but he has certain leanings, and he wants us to stop looking. How do you stop looking? I mean, we've already found it. We have a case in New York where a hotel has paid $59 million, $59 million because it's housing migrants, illegal migrants, all illegal, I believe.
And they were being paid twice the normal room rate at 100% occupancy.
Unbelievable.
So it's a racket.
Mr. Musk, can I ask you a question? You
Well,
said
I don't know if it's problematic here. In fact, I don't think enough people are as engaged or speak up quite as much. It's the hierarchy, I think, is a big deal in politics, and you know, it matters. It definitely matters. I think it's important. This is a special topic that they're kind of pushing. I mean, Trump has delegated this campaign promise to Elon to help deliver, and so him chiming in, I mean, he's it's either going to be Trump saying like, Elon, what do you think, over and over again, or Elon can jump in and answer when he's got the details. The outcome is what Trump is after. Most efficient and effective government that we could have, period. Elon is running through the examples and details of how they're going about doing that and the decision-making process they undertake and so forth.
If I may sort of just going for the president's comments, at a high level, you say, what are the two ingredients that are really necessary in order to cut the budget deficit in half from 2 trillion to 1 trillion? And it's really two things: competence and caring. And if you add competence and caring, you'll cut the budget deficit in half. And I fully expect to be screwed.
Yeah, the competence thing is a big deal. I don't even know what to say. I don't want to dive too deep in that at the moment. But why has no one in office ever investigated corruption until now, says Kyle. I'm astonished. The level of it that is coming out is just like, it's jarring. I mean, it's that thing, right? You have Elon here, Tesla stocks getting hit. People aren't buying his products, so forth, because of everything going on. Trump famously, I don't remember the exact numbers, but to keep the math simple, if he was net worth 10 billion, it dropped to like 7 or 8 billion. His net worth diminished significantly over his first presidency up till now. You have people that are, losing net worth, losing their wealth to take office and to be in these positions that they're in. Or you have Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, all these legacy congressional folks, and even presidents and so forth. Biden used to be in the Senate. He knows this process a little bit too well. You have all these folks who go in of, modest means, let's say, and not too long later, they're worth millions, tens of millions, and in some cases, hundreds of millions of dollars. So somebody getting paid, a couple $100,000 a year, yeah, great salary, but how did you, of that $200,000 a year job, how did that elevate you to be worth, over $100 million in 10 years? Like, maybe they need to write a book on that. That's pretty crazy. So in terms of trust and where I think people have the right intentions for things, that's where I lean towards, is like, look, it's the people that, yeah, he is a billionaire, as is Trump, but they're losing massive amounts of dollars. They're putting their, legacy from a financial standpoint and a family standpoint at risk, in order to do something that they believe in, is, good for the American people. Not the other way around, pretending to do something good for the American people to enrich yourself, which is which is the case, unfortunately, with a lot of our Congress, whether it's Republican or Democrat.
Recognized and get a daily proctology exam, basically. Might as well just camp out there. So it's not like I think I can get away with something. I'll be scrutinized nonstop.
Sorry. Excuse me, guys. Domus saying can't be just insider trading. I think that's becoming more and more clear. There's other ways they've gone about, managing their corruption. Very unfortunate, right? I mean, they're just giving themselves the money now at this point, or hiring family members.
But with the support of the president, we can cut the budget deficit in half from 2 trillion to 1, and then with deregulation, because there's a lot of sort of regulations that don't ultimately serve the public good. We need to free the builders of America to build, and if we do that, that means I think we can get the economic growth to be maybe 3-4%, maybe 5%, and that means if you can get $1 trillion of economic growth and you cut the budget deficit by $1 trillion, between now and next year, there is no inflation. There's no inflation in 26. And if the government is not borrowing as much, it means that interest costs decline. So everyone's, the mortgage, their car payment, their credit card bills, anything, their student debt, the monthly payments drop. That's a fantastic scenario for the average American. I mean, imagine they're going down the grocery aisle and the prices from one year to the next are the same, and their mortgage, all their debt payments dropped. How great is that for the average American?
We had no idea. We had no idea we were going to find this much, and it's open. It's not like complicated. It's
not
simple
that complicated.
stuff. It's
just
like,
a lot of work. Yeah.
We can't believe it. A lot of work. A lot of smart people involved. Very, very smart people. But you're talking about anywhere maybe $500 billion. It's crazy the kind of numbers you're talking
really crazy.
about. You know, normally when you're looking at something, you'll find you're looking for 1 out of 100. Here, you're almost reversing it. You look for one that's good.
Yeah.
And you can look at the title and you say, why are we doing this? Why are we doing that? And the public gets it. You know, the public gets it. You've seen the polls. The public is saying, why are we paying all this money? This for years, this has gone on.
President Trump,
Yeah, go ahead. Wait, go ahead.
Senator Rand Paul today said that Doge cuts will ultimately need a vote in Congress. Do you agree with that? Is that the plan?
I really don't know. I know this. We're finding tremendous fraud and tremendous abuse. If I need a vote of Congress to find fraud and abuse, it's fine with me. I think we'll get the vote, although there'll be some people that wouldn't vote. And how could a judge want to hold us back from finding all of this fraud and finding all of this incompetence? Why would that happen? Why would even...
You know, the crazy thing about the judge shutting this down is the government, major corporations, they always hire consultants. They come in. What do they look at? They look at the numbers, open up the books, do analysis, give recommendations, hand that off to whomever is in charge, the president in this case. And then the president can decide whether they, agree or disagree, take action or not, make a decision or not. I don't see what the difference is between that and what Musk is doing effectively right now and how a judge is stepping in to impede. You know, like how you can be a judge and you just say, I'm gonna put a stop to this because I'm a Democrat, not a Republican, and we need to kind of slow down the winning. We need to stop them from looking so good. I don't know what the mindset is going into that sort of scenario.
Congress want to do that. Now, Congress, if we do need a vote, I think we'd get a very easy vote because we have a track record now. We've already found billions of dollars of abuse, incompetence, and corruption. A lot of corruption.
If a judge does block one of your policies, part of your agenda, will you abide by that ruling? Will you comply
Well, I
with that
always
order?
abide by the courts, and then I'll have to appeal it. But then what he's done is he slowed down the momentum, and it gives crooked people more time to cover up the books. You know, if a person's crooked and they get caught, other people see that, and all of a sudden it becomes harder later on. So, yeah, the answer is I always abide by the courts, always abide by them, and will appeal. But appeals take a long time, and I would hope that a judge, if you go into a judge and you show him, here's a corrupt situation, we have a check to be sent, but we found it to be corrupt. Do you want us to send this corrupt check to a person, or do you want us not to give it and give it back to the taxpayer? I would hope a judge would say, don't send it, give it back to the taxpayer.
Yeah, if I can add to that, what we're finding is that a bunch of the fraud is not even going to Americans. So I think we can all agree that if there's going to be fraud, it should at least go to Americans. But a bunch of the fraud rings that are operating in the United States and taking advantage of the federal government, especially in the entitlements programs, are actually foreign fraud rings. They're operating in other countries and actually exporting money to other countries. We should stop that. And this is big numbers. Talk about $100 to $200 billion a year.
Hold on, we got to rewind this. Let me get this straight.
Money. A bunch of
later on. So, yeah, the answer is I always abide by the courts, always abide by them, and will appeal. But appeals take a long time, and I would hope that a judge, if you go into a judge and you show him, here's a corrupt situation, we have a check to be sent, but we found it to be corrupt. Do you want us to send this corrupt check to a person, or do you want us not to give it and give it back to the taxpayer? I would hope a judge would say, don't send it, give it back to the taxpayer.
Yeah, if I can add to that, what we're finding is that a bunch of the fraud is not even going to Americans. So I think we can all agree that if there's going to be a fraud, it should at least go to Americans. But a bunch of the fraud rings that are operating in the United States and taking advantage of the federal government, especially in the entitlements programs, are actually foreign fraud rings. They're operating in other countries and actually exporting money to other countries. We should stop that. And this is big numbers. Talk about $100 to $200 billion a year.
Sure.
Serious money.
Mr. Musk, you said on X that an example of the fraud that you have cited was $50 million of condoms was sent to Gaza. But after fact-check this, apparently Gaza in Mozambique, and the program was to protect them against HIV. So can you correct the statements? It wasn't sent to Hamas, actually. It was sent to Mozambique, which makes sense why condoms was sent there.
Yeah.
And how can we make sure that all the statements that you said were correct, so we can trust what you say?
Well, first of all, some of the things that I say will be incorrect and should be corrected. So nobody's going to bat 1,000. I mean, we will make mistakes, but we'll act quickly to correct any mistakes. I'm not sure we should be sending $50 million worth of condoms to anywhere, frankly. I'm not sure that's something Americans would be really excited about. And that is really an enormous number of condoms, if you think about it. But if it went to Mozambique instead of Gaza, I'm like, okay, that's not as bad, but still, why are we doing that?
Mr. Musk, can you talk a little bit about
1,000. I mean, we will make mistakes, but we'll act quickly to correct any mistakes. I'm not sure we should be sending $50 million worth of condoms to anywhere, frankly. I'm not sure that's something Americans would be really excited about. And that is really an enormous number of condoms, if you think about it. If it went to Mozambique instead of Gaza, I'm like, okay, that's not as bad, but still, why are we doing that?
Mr. Musk, can you talk a little bit about how closely you're working with agency heads as you're directing these cuts? Do they have how much input do agency heads have when you're making these decisions?
Yeah, we work closely with the agency heads, so there are sort of checks in place. So it's not just us just going in and doing things willy-nilly. It's in partnership with the agency heads, and I check frequently with the president to make sure that this is what the president wants to have happen. So we talk almost every day, and I double check things to make sure, is this something, Mr. President, you want us to do this? Then we'll do it.
USAID has been one of your main targets. Are you concerned at all that some of the cuts or that shutting that agency altogether may lead to diseases or other bigger problems starting in other countries that then come to the United States? Yeah, so that's an interesting example. So that's something where we work closely with the State Department and Secretary Rubio. And we have, for example, turned on funding for Ebola prevention and for HIV prevention. You left that, you said?
Yes, correct. And we are moving fast.
Hey, Mark, probably weren't here a little bit ago, but we went over. Elon has come out and he's talked about his Asperger's, and one of, I don't know, but I can only think attributes. One of the, it's not a consequence, just one of the things that comes along with it commonly is speech pattern, such as his that he's exhibiting now with stutters and so forth. So it's not something out of the ordinary in that respect. It's just how it is for him.
So we will make mistakes, but we'll also fix the mistakes very quickly. So
do you see it as a worthy cause, USAID?
I think that there's some worthy things, but overall, if you say what was the bang for the buck, I would say it was not very good. And there was far too much of what USAID was doing was influencing elections in ways that I think were dubious and do not stand the light of day.
I can just ask a follow-up to the Pentagon contracts. If you have received billions of dollars in contracts from the Pentagon, and the president's directing you to look into the Department of Defense, is that
which we
a
definitely need
conflict
to
of
do and
interest?
are going to do at the president's request.
Does that present a conflict of interest for you?
No, because you'd have to look at the individual contract and say, first of all, I'm not the one, filing the contract. It's people at SpaceX or someone who will be putting for the contract. And I'd like to say, if you see any contract where where it was awarded to SpaceX and it wasn't by far the best value for money for the taxpayer, let me know, because every one of them was.
The president said the other day that you might look at treasuries. Could you explain that a little bit? What kind of fraud, and that question goes to both of you, what kind of fraud are you expecting to see or do you see right now in U.S. treasuries?
Yeah, I think you mean the Treasury Department as opposed to Treasury bills. Or
you also referenced treasuries on Air Force One the other night.
Go ahead. Well, as I mentioned earlier, really the first order of business is to make sure we're actually collecting. Sorry for this. I thought my son might enjoy this, but he's sticking his fingers in my ears and stuff. So it's a bit hard to hear sometimes. Hey, stop that. No, the stuff we're doing with Treasury Department is so basic that you can't believe it doesn't exist already. So for example, like I mentioned, just making sure that when a payment goes out, it has to have a payment categorization code. It's like, what type of payment is this? You can't just leave the field blank. Currently, many payments, the field is left blank. And you have to describe what's the payment for, some basic rationalization. That also is left blank. So this is why, the Pentagon, when's the last time the Pentagon passed an audit? I mean, a decade ago, maybe? Ever? Really? And we want to, just in order to actually pass audits, you have to have financial information that allows you to trace the payments. And once in a while, the Treasury has to pause payments if it thinks the payment is going to a fraudulent organization. If a company or an organization is on a do not pay list, we should not pay it. I'm sure you would agree. It's like if it's quite hard to get on that payment, the do not pay list, it means that this is someone that is just, it's like dead people, terrorists, known fraudsters, that kind of thing. We should not pay them. But currently we do, which is crazy. We should stop that.
Many transactions. And by the way, hundreds, thousands of transactions like that. We have a big team. And for the sake of the country, I hope that the person that's in charge and the other people that report to me that are in charge are allowed to do the right thing, namely make sure everything's honest, legitimate, and competent. But we're looking at just, when you look at USAID, that's one. We're going to look at the military. We're going to look at education. They're much bigger areas. But the USAID is really corrupt. I'll tell you, it's corrupt. It's incompetent, and it's really corrupt. And I can't imagine a judge saying, well, it may be corrupt, but you don't have the right. You got elected to look over the country and to, as we say, make America great again, but you don't have the right to go and look and see whether or not things are right that they're paying or that things are honest that they're paying. And nobody can even believe this. Other people, law professors, they've been saying, how can you take that person's right away? You're supposed to be running the country, but we're not allowed to look at who they're paying it to and what they're paying. We have massive amounts of fraud that we caught. I think we probably caught way over a lot of billions of dollars already in, 2 weeks?
Yes.
And it's going to go to numbers that you're not going to believe. And much, as I said, much is incompetence and much is dishonesty. We have to catch it. And the only way we're going to catch it is to look for it. And if a judge is going to say you're not allowed to look for it, that's pretty sad for our country. I don't understand how it could even work.
The buyout program, can you personally guarantee that?
Which one?
The buyout program, the offer to federal workers. Can you personally guarantee that the workers who opt in to resign now will be paid through September?
Well, they'll get their money, but they're getting a good deal. They're getting a big buyout. And
that was a weird question. Can you personally guarantee that the people that opt in will effectively get the buyout. Like, why wouldn't they? This is the whole point of the program. I don't understand. That's severance for that. That's that was really strange.
And what we're trying to do is reduce government. We have too many people. We have office space. It's occupied by 4%. Nobody's showing up to work because they were told not to. And then Biden gave them a 5-year pass, some of them, 48,000 of them, gave them a 5-year pass, that for 5 years you don't have to show up to work. And let me tell you, this is largely, much of this stuff is because of Biden. It's his fault. He allowed this country, what he did on our border. What he did on our border is almost not as bad as what he did with all of these contracts that have come out. It's a very sad day when we look at it. I can't even believe it. But many contracts just extend, and they just keep extending, and there was nobody there to correct it. And that cannot be, I can't imagine that could be held up by the court. Any court that would say that the president or his representatives, like Secretary of the Treasury, Secretary of State, whatever, doesn't have the right to go over their books and make sure everything's honest. I mean, how can you have a country? You can't have anything that way. You can't have a business that way. You can't have a country that way. Hey, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Press. Thank you, Press. Head out.
Coming back tonight. Mark Fogel will be at the White House tonight at about 10 o'clock. If you want to come over, you can say hello to him.
Did the U.S. give anything in return?
Not much. No, they were very nice. We were treated very nicely by...
Paul, interesting comment. Sounds like Trump is going to stiff workers. What does that mean? When, says Dinosaur Dance. When what? The faster we take responsibility. I mean, I'm hoping that it just continues on this cycle. They just like go through different programs, and once they identify it, Trump just, signs the dotted line and things get done like immediately. Someone thinks 5 years paid vacation isn't enough. Means that people are suckers. So listen, if this was a corporation, major corporation, a lot of times people just turn up one day and they give them a pink slip, say, here's a box, pack your stuff, thanks, we don't need you anymore. And what at that point? It's not common for companies to give severance. Some do, which is great, but I don't know. It sounds like a good deal to me. Like, just don't show up. You'll continue to get paid, or you'll get a lump sum for 7 months, and in the meantime, you can, find out what you want to do next. Like's being said here, take a vacation for a little bit if you want. You can, go get some new training. You could go do a lot of things. I mean, that's plenty of time to sort out what comes next. In my view, that's a lot of good time to be able to do something like that.
Russia, actually. I hope that's the beginning of a relationship where we can end that war and millions of people can stop being killed. They've lost millions of people. They lost, in terms of soldiers, probably 1.5 million soldiers.
So I don't know why that there's an assumption, though, that if somebody works for the federal government, they have employment for life, don't have to deal with the same challenges that happen elsewhere. Like in the economy, that's constantly looking to be efficient and effective, and if they're going through a downturn and their products, services, whatever company it might be, is not in demand at that moment, they have to adjust. They have to figure out how to do business differently, and that might require reducing the number of staff. That's just the nature of the business. I don't know why there's an assumption that government can't get more efficient over time, especially you think of all the automation that's unfolded over the last couple of decades and the potential of AI coming up. Why keep people doing the exact same thing? You can either do more or do differently and, consume less capital or less, investment to achieve the same outcomes. Everyone unemployed from their government sectors should walk up and down That reporter's strange question was made to give ignorant folks. Yeah. Okay. They want to stiff workers. Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, I think it's a good deal. Like 7 months for the lion's share of the country. 7 months is plenty of time to find something that's equivalent, right? As you kind of move up in the social scale of things, it may become a little bit more difficult. But I mean, 7 months is a lot of time to sort things out. I mean, really, that's a really long amount of time. All right, let me get over here to my buddy Wolf, who the other day was talking about this. Again, misconstrued.
Happening now, breaking news. A judge just extended the deadline for federal workers to accept or reject the Trump administration's so-called buyout offer. Thousands of government employees in limbo right now as the court weighs whether the plan is legal. Also breaking.
That gets me. The plan is legal. The idea, what aspect of it is not legal? Potentially the, hey, we're reducing staff, so we're going to lay off people. Is that part not legal to lay off people? Is it that you can't give somebody 7 months severance? And if they're saying that's not enough time, who decides how much time is appropriate?
The White House is being accused of failing to comply with court orders to unfreeze federal grants and to reinstate USAID staffers. This, as Vice President J.D. Vance is fueling fears that the Trump and Musk team may ignore judges' decisions that they simply don't like. Plus, does the president really have power over pennies? We're making sense of his order to stop producing 1-cent coins. Welcome to our viewers here in the United States and around the world. I'm Wolf.
All right, so his opening remarks and the very first person that he has do some analysis is kind of interesting. We're just going to catch that clip and kind of relate it to what we just saw from the president here.
Blitzer, you're in the Situation Room.
This is CNN Breaking News.
And we begin with breaking news. One of President Trump's most aggressive efforts to force out federal workers on an extended hold tonight after a judge heard legal arguments for and against the Deferred Resignation Program, as it's called. CNN's Paula Reed is joining us right now to break it all down for us. Paula, what are you learning?
Well, federal workers did not get the clarity they were hoping for after today's hearing, but the judge did extend the deadline for federal.
Wait a minute. It's being okay. So here's the thing: a lot of people, you just catch that beginning, right? Like, oh, Trump took a L. Like, the judge has rejected things, and then what did you learn? The workers did not get the clarity they're looking for. Like, wait, what? But he did extend the deadline. So what does that mean? So it's not like it's going into effect as of, this might have been Monday, but it's not going into effect right away. It's going to go into effect in a week, in 2 weeks. Let's see what she says timeline-wise.
Federal employees to have to reply to this deferred resignation offer. And while this deadline has been extended, the judge up in Boston, a Clinton appointee, will contemplate the arguments that he heard today about the validity of this offer. Now, lawyers representing federal workers unions have been discouraging employees from accepting this offer, saying, one, it's not clear exactly what they're being offered. It's also not clear if the
This is strange. So the unions don't want them to accept the offer because immediately they lose union members. I mean, there's 80,000 or so people that may no longer be part of that union, who each pay in, I don't know, however much a month in union dues. That'll be gone. Of course, it's not in the interest of the union for that to happen. I hate to say it, but it feels like more so for themselves as a union than for the workers individually.
the Trump administration has the authority to enforce something like this. It's not clear if employees would actually get their paychecks through September. They also told the judge today that these employees had only been given, quote, 2 weeks notice to make important decisions about their futures. They said this is not what Congress envisioned when they reformed the civil service and suggested that the Trump administration is trying to push out civil servants so that they can replace them with Trump loyalists. Now, the Justice Department, they argue that this buyout program offers, quote, a humane off-ramp to federal government employees who might have structured their life around remote work opportunities, which of course have come to an end. And they insist that this is all within the purview and the power of the federal government to manage its workforce. So now all eyes are on this judge as we await a decision on the legitimacy of this offer.
Interesting. Paula, 2 federal judges, I take it, are now accusing the Trump administration of defying court orders. Walk us through this.
Yeah, this is fascinating because this is happening in the wake of this tweet from Vice President J.D. Vance, where he seems to suggest that maybe the executive branch of the president doesn't necessarily have to heed orders from judges. Of course, he tweeted, quote, if a judge tried to tell a general how to conduct a military operation, that would be illegal. If a judge tried to command the attorney general and how to use her discretion as a prosecutor, that's also illegal. That is not an accurate representation of the separation of powers, but it raised the question of whether the Trump administration may not abide by orders from the courts. And of course, the courts are really considered the only check on the executive right now and the action specifically that President.
So comments in the chat, ever heard of fair employment laws? I just always compare this in my mind, just to keep it simple, because I'm not going to give a rundown of employment law. Even if I got a summary of it, I'd probably forget it, to be perfectly honest. But this type of stuff happens in the private sector all the time. This is the standard operating procedure. This is what people are dealing with commonly. And it's the same thing of Congress giving themselves better health care than anything that they would pass for the general population. Them making sure that their pensions are intact and not really doing anything about pensions that are out there for the unions that have been desperately asking for them to kind of be shored up. This to me is along those lines. Why is the federal government staff, why is it okay to say they're immune from any of these types of things that everyone else deals with? And it's not that it's something that's out of retribution or what have you. It's just the idea of you always want to get as efficient and effective as possible. Unfortunately, over the course of, decades and decades, things have grown exponentially and unnecessarily. So this is the current state that we're in, and they have to take immediate action on it.
Trump and Elon Musk are taking. And then we see these 2 significant events today. First, a federal judge today, for the second time, telling the Trump administration that it cannot cut off grants or loan payments that have already been allocated. They've tried to do that. That has been litigated. Their order is on hold, but while it's on hold, they do need to disperse that money, according to a judge's order that so far they have ignored. And then a federal worker also told the judge Monday that the Trump administration hasn't reinstated USAID employees who were put on leave. So, Wolf, these are 2 concerning examples of perhaps the Trump administration deciding they don't need to abide by court orders.
Yeah, I suspect there could be more to come. Paula Reed.
All right, so that was just a quick glimpse into how the rest of the media is reading what's happening. Initially, I hope you kind of caught that they blew some of it out of proportion, making it seem like Trump took an incredible loss to, his policy position and what he's trying to achieve. But in reality, the only thing that's tangibly happened is the date has been extended for people to elect whether or not they want to take part in the voluntary severance program. All right. Now to everybody's new favorite press secretary. Super big upgrade from before. This is from a couple days ago, but I mean, as always, everybody is, really clicking in the administration. Everything is synced up, on point, And this is probably maybe the greatest demonstration of it when they get to Caroline Leavitt, and she's having a word with the media. Not really taking questions, she's literally having a word with them. I've actually applied to see if I can get into I don't know if it's just the social media seat that they have in there or alternatives or what have you, but I've tried to see if I can get in there, but we'll see how that works out. There's about 7,000 people that were signed up at the time when I submitted my request.
Afternoon, everybody. Good to see you all. President Trump is in charge and America is back. This week further demonstrated that the Trump effect is real. Over the weekend, Americans celebrated the return of American-Israeli citizen Keith Siegel and 2 Israelis who were held captive by Hamas terrorists since October 7th, 2023. President Trump and his administration worked diligently to secure their release and are committed to freeing all remaining hostages. Yesterday, as you all know, President Trump held his first foreign meeting at the White House with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. And as the president said, the bonds of friendship and affection between the American and Israeli people have endured for generations and are absolutely unbreakable. The president is committed to eliminating Hamas and securing a lasting peace for the entire region. The historic proposal for the United States to take over Gaza, announced by President Trump last night, underscores this commitment. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. President Trump is an outside-of-the-box thinker and a visionary leader who solves problems that many others, especially in this city, claim are unsolvable. We've already seen the results from President Trump's bold peace-through-strength diplomacy on the world stage. In response to President Trump's tariffs this week, both Mexico and Canada took immediate steps to alleviate the illegal alien migration and flow of deadly drugs, particularly fentanyl, into our country. Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum agreed to permanently supply 10,000 Mexican soldiers on the U.S. border who will be specifically designated to stopping fentanyl and criminal aliens from pouring into our country. And Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau agreed to appoint a fentanyl czar, list cartels as terrorists, and increase resources to assist the 10,000 frontline personnel at our northern border with Canada. In recognition of these steps, President Trump paused the implementation of tariffs for 1 month while negotiations continue and final deals can be structured. Throughout the transition and during his inaugural address, President Trump made it known that the United States cannot and will not allow the Chinese Communist Party to continue with its effective and growing control over the Panama Canal. Following Secretary Rubio's successful first trip and visit there over the weekend, Panama's president said he will allow its participation in the Chinese Communist Party's, it will no longer allow the participation in the Belt and Road Initiative. That participation will expire. This is significant because Panama was the first Latin American nation to join Belt and Road and now becomes the first to back away from it because of President Trump. And to assist with the ongoing mass deportation effort, El Salvador's president has agreed to the most unprecedented migratory agreement anywhere in the world. Because President Trump is back in charge, El Salvador has offered for illegal aliens of any nationality facing deportation in the U.S. to be booked in his country's prison system. And finally, President Trump's envoy for special missions, Rick Grenell, traveled to Venezuela and not only secured the release of 6 American hostages, but Venezuela also agreed to accept the return of illegal alien Tren de Aragua gang members. All of these incredible victories prove how well President Trump's peace-through-strength approach is working. And the days of weak American leadership are over. In another success story this week, efforts to seal the border, halt the invasion, and carry out the largest mass deportation campaign continue at lightning speed. Customs and Border Protection has approximately 79 miles of new border wall projects already underway in various stages of construction and planning. The first flights arrived to Guantanamo Bay yesterday afternoon out of El Paso. And who were some of the passengers aboard, you may ask? There were 10 members of the transnational gang Tren de Aragua on this flight. And overall, our heroic ICE agents continue to prioritize the removal of violent, criminal, illegal aliens in communities across the country. On February 3rd, ICE Dallas arrested a citizen of Nicaragua who has been convicted of sexual assault, strong arm, and lewd acts with a minor and sentenced to 15 years in prison. ICE Los Angeles arrested a Mexican citizen who has been convicted of lewd acts with a minor and sentenced to 364 days. And ICE Atlanta arrested a citizen of Mexico who has been convicted of homicide by vehicle and hit and run and sentenced to 6 months confinement. And ICE New York arrested a Venezuelan national and known TDA gang member who has a prior criminal conviction for assault in the 3rd degree causing physical injury. Americans are safer every single time one of these criminals is arrested and deported from our country. On another important and ongoing topic, the Senate is working fast to confirm President Trump's exceptional cabinet nominees in the face of relentless media smear campaigns. As of right now, 12 members of the president's cabinet have been confirmed, most recently Pam Bondi, who, as you all know, I was just in the Oval Office for that swearing-in ceremony surrounded by Pam's lovely family, and we look forward to watching her serve as the Attorney General of the United States. According to CNN, President Trump is getting more cabinet picks confirmed so far than the average president in the modern era. Another success story. And we believe it's critical that Republicans in the Senate majority stay tough and keep their foot on the gas to confirm all of the remaining nominees as quickly as possible so we can continue President Trump's important work here at the White House and across our entire federal government. And lastly, throughout his historic campaign, President Trump pledged to restore common sense to our country. And he is continuing to deliver on that with an executive order that he will sign later today. The president will be signing an executive order keeping men out of women's sports to defend the safety of athletes, protect competitive integrity, and uphold the promise of Title IX. This common sense action from President Trump ends the disgusting betrayal of women and girls by the previous administration, who for years catered to radical activists who wanted biological males to be treated as women in workplace showers, competitive sports, prisons, and even rape shelters.
Paul, this is our new press secretary, Caroline Leavitt. She's had, I think, either 2 or 3 press briefings like this. Other ones have just been kind of ad hoc, just on the White House grounds. But I thought super sharp. You'll see in a minute. They throw a lot of pretty tough questions at her, and she's able to handle them and redirect and everything pretty well.
Ideology insanity is over. Submissions from individuals across the country interested in participating in our new media seat at a future briefing continue to flood in. We are at more than 12,000 and counting. If you're watching right now and are interested, you can continue to apply on our new media website, whitehouse.gov/newmedia. And in the seat today, we have a longtime national television broadcaster. I'm sure many of you recognized her when she came in, Sage Steele, who is now the host of an incredibly successful podcast, The Sage Steele Show, on YouTube and all podcast platforms. And previously, Sage was a fixture at ESPN from 2007 to 2023, primarily hosting SportsCenter, which we all know well, before leaving the company to exercise her First Amendment rights more freely. We are honored to welcome her to the briefing room today. She will be joining the president at the big EO signing later this afternoon. I know many of you will be there as well. So Sage, why don't you kick us off on this very exciting day for women and girls across the country. Thank you for joining us.
It is exciting, and Caroline, thank you for welcoming people like me with a little bit of a different perspective, different background in this seat. It really does mean a lot. Thank you. Obviously, the House already passed the Protection of Women and Girls in Sports Act, which was a really big step for women and girls. So far, the Senate, as we know, has not brought it up to vote. We all know executive orders can be overturned, so I'm wondering how important it is to the president to get Congress to bring this, to pass legislation, so there are no instances like the past administration that really tried to destroy Title IX.
It's incredibly important that Congress immediately acts on this priority. I think the president is really setting the tone, making this a very immediate priority for this administration, just as he promised to do on the campaign trail. And I'd like to get into the executive order a little bit, because it is the news of the day here at the White House, and talk about what this executive action will actually do. So the executive order that the president will be signing later this afternoon, as I said, upholds the promise of Title IX. It also will require the DOJ to abide by the nationwide previous administration's illegal Title IX rewrite that would have dissolved single-sex spaces and opportunities. It also requires immediate action, including enforcement actions against schools and athletic associations comprised of schools that deny women single-sex sports in single-sex locker rooms. The executive order also calls for the convening of private sporting bodies in the White House. We want them to come to this campus so the president can hear in person the stories of female athletes who.
So I think that's a tremendous step forward that she's talking about here. But I do want to recognize Dinosaur Dance. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Very awesome pushback. Very funny, Paul.
Have suffered lifelong injuries, who have been silenced and forced to shower with men and compete with men on athletic fields across the country. Many of those women will be at the White House today. I encourage all of you in the media to actually talk to them, to hear their stories. And I would also just add one more thing. This is a wildly popular position with the American people. In fact, there was a new poll recently that showed the overwhelming majority of Democrats also support keeping biological men out of women's sports. And so I know the president is very excited about the bill signing that will take place at 3 o'clock this afternoon. You will hear from him more on that later, and we look forward to seeing you there, Sage. So thank you very, very much. Garrett, great to see you here today.
Thank you. On Gaza, the president has spent basically his entire public career criticizing foreign entanglements, nation building.
So last time she had a session, of course, she always is starting off now with the new media folks that are coming in, if they run a podcast or what have you. But last time there was a bunch of basement dwellers. Let's see if they're still in there that ask questions.
Sending American troops,
and you'll know what I'm talking about when you see them,
to fight abroad, particularly in the Middle East. This plan seems like it could ultimately involve all of those things. Can you explain this reversal and how building and owning Gaza squares with America First foreign policy?
I would reject the premise of your question that this forces the United States to be entangled in conflicts abroad. The president has not committed to putting boots on the ground in Gaza. He has also said that the United States is not going to pay for the rebuilding of Gaza. His administration is going to work with our partners in the region to reconstruct this region. And let me just take a step back here, because this is an out-of-the-box idea. That's who President Trump is. That's why the American people elected him. And his goal is lasting peace in the Middle East for all people in the region. And as I said in my opening remarks, we've had the same people pushing the same solutions to this problem for decades. And it's been made very clear to the president that the United States needs to be involved in this rebuilding effort to ensure stability in the region for all people. But that does not mean boots on the ground in Gaza. It does not mean American taxpayers will be funding this effort. It means Donald Trump, who is the best deal maker on the planet, is going to strike a deal with our partners in the region.
He did not rule out American troops in Gaza last night. Are you doing that now?
I am saying that the president has not committed to that just yet. He has not made that commitment, and you know that.
And on the foreign partners, the Jordanians, the Egyptians, the Saudis have already panned this plan. What foreign partners, if any, have expressed any interest in being part of it?
Well, the president has said he's been socialing this idea for quite some time. He's been thinking about this. He said in his remarks last night this was not a decision or an announcement that he takes lightly. And the president has already spoken to the President al-Sisi. In fact, that was his first foreign leader call. He's meeting with the King of Jordan, King Abdullah, next week. He spoke with the King of Bahrain. He spoke with the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. And he has made it very clear, he's been very vocal, that he expects our partners in the region, particularly Egypt and Jordan, to accept Palestinian refugees temporarily so that we can rebuild their home. I'd like to show you some images of Gaza that were taken. Fox News aired this. I mean, that is, as they put it, in an apocalyptic scene in Gaza. This is an uninhabitable place for human beings. Do you really think that families can live their dream in a region that looks like this, with no running water, no electricity? And the special envoy to the president, Steve Witkoff, recently traveled to Gaza, as you all know. And he came back with images that he showed the president of the dire situation here. And the president made this decision with a humanitarian heart for all people in the region. Peter.
Thank you, Caroline.
No, this is from earlier this week. So she's had 3 sessions in the White House like this now. I think I just counted it on the page. There's been 3 briefings like this. The other ones have just been ad hoc on the White House grounds, just outside of the building and so forth. But this one is particularly interesting because of what they're talking about here. Remember, Trump talked about kind of the United States stepping in Gaza to help kind of clear out the debris, reestablish infrastructure, buildings, and so forth. I can't remember his exact term. He said the excuse me, guys. The Riviera of the Middle East, or something like that. That he it's kind of like a post World War II scenario where he wants to rebuild, do something of that extent, and then bring people back together in there. So I'm interested in it because honestly, people have done the same thing over and over again for years. I think that was mentioned in the chat here as well. Definition of insanity, right? Just do the same thing over and over again, or maybe we try something new and completely rebuild and recreate the environment. I don't know. I don't know what the right answer is, but I'm up for trying something new because same old hasn't really worked out for the last 100 years. Has it been that long? Maybe it hasn't been that long, but you know what I mean. It hasn't worked out for, let's say, the last 75 years.
Are any officials here preparing to fight Democratic lawmakers in the streets?
Absolutely not.
So
Thanks for the question.
Some elected Democrats are so steamed about Doge. Congresswoman LaMonica McIver says we are.
My favorite White House correspondent here, right? By the way, let's go back. Let's get Caroline calling on him again.
A humanitarian heart for all people in the region. Peter.
Thank you, Caroline. Are any officials here?
To Paul, was she DEI? And I assume you're talking about Caroline here. No, she's clearly competent. In my perspective, she is not DEI. She is clearly competent.
Preparing to fight Democratic lawmakers in the streets?
Absolutely not.
So
thanks for the question.
Some elected Democrats are so steamed about Doge. Congresswoman LaMonica McIver says we are at war. Ilhan Omar says we might actually see somebody get killed. And Chris Van Hollen says we have to fight this in the Congress. We have to fight this in the streets. So what now?
And may I just point out, if you heard that type of violent, enticing rhetoric from our side of the aisle, from Republican leaders on Capitol Hill, I think there would be a lot more outrage in this room today.
Hey, Daniel says, it sounds like you should learn the history of what happened in Palestine since the Second World War. I can sum it up for you real quick for everybody. It has been a cycle of unbearable and yet countless perpetrations followed up with retribution. And you don't have to pick a side as to who started what, because we've looped in that cycle so many times now. It's just, it's gotten to be too much of a norm. So if we want to try to do something different, I'm all for it, and I'm hopeful that it settles things for good.
It's unacceptable, the comments that have been made by these Democrat leaders, and frankly, they don't even know what they're talking about. Because President Trump was elected with a mandate from the American people to make this government more efficient. He campaigned across this country with Elon Musk, vowing that Elon was going to head up the Department of Government Efficiency, and the two of them, with a great team around them, were going to look at the receipts of this federal government and ensure it's accountable to American taxpayers. That's all that is happening here, and for Democrat officials...
Missing a couple of the comments here. Are you doing Russian talking points? No, she's... I mean, these are White House talking points that she's kind of going over. a lot of it, I mean, being the press secretary, she's crafting or approving, reviewing. So she's point for all of this, right? This is coming directly from her. This isn't foreign influence or anything like that,
Officials to incite violence and encourage Americans to take to the streets is incredibly alarming, and they should be held accountable for that rhetoric.
It sounds like something that they're most concerned about is Doge engineers with access to Treasury systems. Can you clarify? Do the Doge engineers have read-only access in these systems, so they are not allowed to write new code? No. They are not. Okay. No. And then one more thing. NBC is reporting that some of the illegal immigrants that we've seen rounded up and arrested are not being deported. They're being released with ankle or wrist monitoring devices, or they have to check in on the phone. So is the administration arresting more people than you have room for?
I have seen the reports, and I'm glad you brought it up because we want to address it. There have been a total of 461 illegal aliens. This is of this morning when I got this information from DHS that have been released from custody.
BTK, thank you very much for the donation. I'm really grateful for it. I appreciate it. And so people have to understand the purpose of the federal government is much more limited than was intended today. Yeah, absolutely. With increased tech, government size increased at the same time. Why? Yeah. And I think that's the case with all kinds of businesses. The number of staff required to do the same set of work, it's that equation keeps shrinking, right? But it's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing because you create new products, you create new services, right? The same folks that were working for Company A, that Company A gets sufficient and they only need 80% of what they had before, the 20%. This is the cycle of capitalism, that 20% put their efforts and their labors towards something new, and those new products, new services continue to build and enhance quality of life for people. That's the direction that we want to head. That's the self-sufficiency we want to have. That's how we want to grow organically, not as directed by a central authority, right? That's how it should happen. The system's broken, unfortunately, right now. It's not operating like that.
Custody of the more than 8,000 that have been arrested since President Trump was inaugurated. It's less than 6%, and there are reasons for their release. Some of the factors include a lack of significant likelihood of removal in the foreseeable future, lack of detention availability, which is something this president and this administration has been incredibly vocal about. We are doing everything we can to deport and detain illegal immigrants, but we need Congress's help to increase funding for Border Patrol and for ICE to increase detention capability in our facilities. And then other serious medical conditions have also been the reasons for some of the release of these individuals. But none of them have final deportation orders. Many of them are probably contesting their immigration status. I'd refer you to DHS for more details, but I did get that information because I knew it would be a question. So thank you. Sure. Yes.
The president and you here again today have made clear, given the devastation, you think Palestinians have no choice but to leave Gaza and go elsewhere. But Palestinians say this is their home. They don't want to go. The president last night said he's willing to use the military if necessary. Is the U.S. prepared to remove Palestinians from Gaza by force?
The president is prepared to rebuild Gaza for Palestinians and all people in the region, peace-loving people who want real economic development and opportunity in the region. This is a region that has been controlled by Iranian-backed terrorists, Hamas, who have brutalized not just Israelis but Palestinians too. It is because of Hamas that you see those images on that screen, that Gaza has become a demolition site because Hamas launched that brutal attack on Israel on October the 7th. And so again, I would stress, President Trump wants to ensure that this can be a place where all people can live in peace. He is a peacemaker in chief. He made that very clear in his first term. And as for how that will be accomplished, the president and his team are talking with our allies in the region to consider next steps.
But should the American people be prepared to see U.S. military on the ground fighting a ground war against Hamas?
Again, the president has not committed to U.S. troops in the region.
But it is an option.
I have said that the president has not committed to that yet. Sure.
If I could just follow up on that, though, why not rule out the idea of committing U.S. troops? This has been a long-standing argument that the president has made really over the last decade or so, talking about endless wars and not something the U.S. wants. Why not rule out troops?
Because I think the president is very good when he's making deals and negotiating not to rule out anything because he wants to preserve that leverage in negotiations. And so I think that's what he's doing here. Mary.
Follow up on that, though. He also said that everyone loves this plan. He said that in the Oval Office this morning.
Sure.
In fact, the Deputy Prime Minister of Jordan called it a declaration of war on the Arab people. So how does he square the fact that even some Republicans on the Hill are objecting to this or questioning this? How does he square the fact saying everyone loves this plan?
Well, King Abdullah of Jordan will be here next week, so I can provide you more context on the conversations he will have directly with the President of the United States after that meeting. And I would just point out that there's been a lot of leaders and officials all around the world who have doubted, I suppose, the deal-making ability of President Trump. You heard the Panama leader saying that he would not agree to some of the concessions that he has now made because of Secretary Rubio's visit. You had the Colombian president saying he wouldn't accept flights of Colombian illegal nationals who have entered into our country illegally, and those flights are underway. So actions speak louder than words. Dasha.
Caroline, you said the president has been working on this idea for a while behind the scenes now. Is there a written plan based on the president's proposal for Gaza? And if so, when was it drafted and who had a hand in that?
The plan was written in the president's remarks last night as he revealed it to the world and to the American people, and his team are continuing to be engaged on this effort. I saw the National Security Advisor this morning. He has a very busy day of calls, and they will, again, continue to engage with our partners. That includes Steve Witkoff as well. Mary.
Two questions for you on the news of the day. So how is today's executive order going to impact the 2028 Summer Olympics in Los Angeles? For example, would a man who thinks that he's a transgender woman be allowed to compete as a female?
Okay, I don't know why she's asking this question because IOC's already ruled on that at this point, but let's see. And wow, did I ever catch her in a good, that was the best pause ever.
Male on U.S. soil?
It's a very good question, and the president has actually mentioned this, that he does expect the Olympic Committee and the NCAA to no longer allow men to compete in women's sports.
NCAA
and I
already
think
ruled
the
on this.
president,
Although this may
with the
be-
signing of his pen, starts a very public pressure
It's been
campaign
ruled
on these organizations to do the right thing for women and for girls across the country. Again, this is an incredibly popular position. There have been many notable female athletes who have had the courage to speak out against some very powerful institutions in this country. They deserve to have a voice and a say. The president is bringing their voice to the highest level at the White House this afternoon, and he expects these organizations to comply with this federal executive order that he'll be signing today.
Thank you. And one more. On media coverage of this executive order and the topic in general, what's the White House's view of framing that calls men transgender females or similar rhetoric coming from organizations like the ACLU and GLAAD?
Well, it's been very clear. The policy of this administration is that there are only two sexes, male and female. Pretty simple. Brian Glenn.
Yes. USAID has gotten a lot of attention in the last couple of days with some of these bizarre things that we've been, taxpayers have been funding. Now it looks like there are a couple media outlets that have been dragged into this conversation as far as USAID funding as well. Does the president have any comment on that?
So upon coming out here to the briefing room, I was made aware of the funding from USAID to media outlets, including Politico, who I know has a seat in this room. And I can confirm that the more than $8 million taxpayer dollars that have gone to essentially subsidizing subscriptions to Politico on the American taxpayers' dime will no longer be happening. The DOJ team is working on canceling those payments now. Again, this is a whole of government effort to ensure that we are going line by line when it comes to the federal government's books. And this president and his team are making decisions across the board on, do these receipts serve the interests of the American people? Is this a good use of the American taxpayers' money? If it is not, that funding will no longer be sent abroad, and American taxpayers will see significant savings because of that effort. Thank you. I'd like to give some love to the back row. I've heard that unfortunately they haven't been called on in years past. So Reagan, why don't you go ahead?
Thanks, Caroline. The WHC announced that comedian Amber Ruffin, who has called the president a toddler with his pants pulled down, will be the entertainment for this year's Correspondents' Dinner. Does the White House have a reaction to this choice, and will the president be attending the dinner this year?
Certainly an interesting choice. I have the president's invitation on my desk. I have the invitation for myself on my desk as well. Haven't talked to the president about it. When he makes his decision, I will let you all know. But definitely an interesting choice of the comedian. I'll talk to the boss about it and see what we decide. Sure, go ahead.
Caroline, in the back.
Yes,
Thank you.
yes.
Appreciate it. On the executive order set to be signed today, you said that this will be enforced. Can you spell out for schools and the public how exactly the administration plans to enforce this, even at the local level? And on top of that, there are human rights groups who say that this could expose kids to discrimination. What is your response to that?
I think kids have already been exposed to discrimination, especially young women and girls who have been forced to shower in locker rooms with biological men, who have been forced to compete on playing fields with biological men, which is incredibly unfair and unsafe, and again, an incredibly unpopular policy with the American people. As for the actions that this executive order takes, I already laid those out at the beginning of the briefing. I'm happy to give you a copy of this fact sheet so you can let your audiences across the country know.
What's your message to schools who don't comply with this?
They should, because it's going to be federal law in about an hour and a half. So your colleague to your right, to my
Thanks,
left.
Caroline.
Yes.
Taylor with Spectrum News. You talked a bit about Doge. Elon Musk is currently a, quote, special government employee who also owns companies that have billions of dollars in federal contracts. You said earlier this week that he has abided by all applicable federal laws, but what steps is the Trump administration taking to address that conflict of interest?
The president was already asked and answered this question this week, and he said if Elon Musk comes across a conflict of interest with the contracts and the funding that Doge is overseeing, then Elon will excuse himself from those contracts. And he has, again, abided by all applicable laws. In the back left, go ahead.
Trade advisor Peter Navarro, when asked about the External Revenue Service today, said, quote, we're going to collect a lot of tariff revenues and we're going to get tax cuts out of it. Is it the official position of the White House that tariffs will lower taxes for Americans?
The president has always been clear that he believes tariffs are a tax on foreign nations, and he's committed to cutting taxes for the American people here at home. He also believes tariffs are a great revenue raiser for this country, and that's exactly why he has committed to the creation of the External Revenue Service, which I think is a phenomenal idea. We'll just go down the whole row. Go ahead.
Tom Bateman with the BBC. Can you confirm that under the President's plans for Gaza, any and all Palestinians who want to stay in Gaza on their land will be allowed to do so?
I can confirm that the president is committed to rebuilding Gaza and to temporarily relocating those who are there because, as I've showed you repeatedly, it is a demolition site. There is no running water. There is no electricity. The president wants these individuals to live in peace. He is committed to doing that with this very bold new plan, and we will continue to keep you apprised of updates as we receive them. Ed Lawrence,
that's not an answer.
Yes, go ahead, Ed.
I appreciate it. Thank you. So now that the President Trump's policies are starting to take shape, how long will it take to cycle through and get some of the actual prices that Americans are paying to come down?
Prices at the store and at the grocery pump, across the board, sure. Well, the president is doing everything he can, obviously, to reduce the cost of living crisis in this country as quickly as possible. That's why he signed a litany of executive orders across the board in the first couple of weeks here. He declared a national energy emergency. He committed to cutting 10 regulations for every new one on the book. As you know, working for a Fox Business-related outlet, deregulation and energy independence are huge drivers of reducing inflation in this country. And I think Americans can be assured by the results President Trump had in his first term, when again inflation was 1.4% when he left office.
Or is it?
Yeah, there's one good thing about watching these briefings live is you get, it's not just about context, but you get the full position or what's actually being done right now. Watching Kareen's press briefings, I don't recall who mentioned it earlier, but I was just scratching my head the whole time because I felt like she was just making it up. It wasn't like, okay, I'm briefed and I'm prepped on, you know, all these different issues and things that people are running with. I don't know. It just seems so arbitrary. But as we found out much later on, Kareen did not actually have standing meetings with the president, sadly. Those would have been interesting if she had. She could have wrote a book about it later on. She actually didn't have access to Biden. And so tough spot for her to be in, but it still didn't feel as satisfying. The only thing that was good is you would wait for Peter Doocy to ask his question, and then of course the combination.
A year, and will Americans have the patience to wait for it?
I don't have a timeline, but the president is doing everything that he possibly can to reduce cost of living for Americans at home. Phil Wegman.
Thank you. Is it worth risking the life of a single U.S. Marine to turn the Gaza Strip into the Riviera of the Middle East?
Phil, I'm not sure why you're asking me that question, because I've already said the president has not committed to sending Marines or any boots on the ground in Gaza. We'll bring it to the front row.
You're holding out a possibility?
Good to see you again here in the front row, Caroline. Two things. On today's announcement, Title IX, if he scales back the education department or moves to shut it down entirely, what entity will enforce Title IX?
As of now, this will be enforced through education, through Title IX. If the abolishment of the Department of Education continues, which, as the president said yesterday, it's something his team is looking at and considering. It's something he talked a lot about on the campaign trail. Then, of course, we will look at additional maneuvers to ensure that these very important policies can be implemented.
Okay, so the education abolishment thing's still on the table. Title IX.
The president talked about it yesterday in the Oval Office, and he has good reason to talk about it. I mean, look, our education system is failing students in this country. The Nation's Report Card, I brought it up in my remarks last week.
You know, it reminds me of Sarah Huckabee Sanders. This is the level of fluency and delivery and not just command of the content, but belief in it. Like foundational belief of what they're trying to do here that she had as well. That's kind of being conveyed here by Caroline. So I don't know. I appreciate it. I don't know. I don't know what state she's from. I didn't know about her until she was appointed. She can go back and be governor of that state, just like Sarah Huckabee Sanders. I don't know, but it's the style is very similar now. I'm realizing, at least I'm seeing it be similar.
It shows that fourth graders are not reading at the level they should. I believe it was 40% of them are proficient in reading. As the mother of a child, I want an education system that helps my child read and write, teaches him math, nothing else in the classroom. And the president is wholeheartedly committed to we can make academia great again in this country.
One other
Deanna.
Oh, thanks, Caroline. Does the president, is he looking at offering anything to these Arab countries that take in Palestinians? Is he willing to give them anything in return? And secondly, when the president announced his taking over Gaza policy yesterday, was Netanyahu aware of this, and what was his reaction when Trump presented that idea to him?
I was I won't get ahead of the president's discussions or negotiations on your first question about what would be offered. I think the president's made it clear that he expects these nations in the region to step up and to accept Palestinian refugees who will be temporarily relocated for the rebuilding of Gaza. As for whether Prime Minister Netanyahu was aware before the president's remarks, he was indeed. I wasn't present for that reaction. But again, this is something the president has been socializing and thinking about for quite some time. Nick, good to see you.
Oh, Jordan.
Jordan, sorry.
Thank you, Caroline. So Secretary Hegseth announced yesterday that Army recruiting levels have reached 12-year highs in December, 15-year highs in January. What is making young people want to serve the military under the Trump administration, and how does that contrast to Biden's failure consistently to meet recruiting average?
Yeah.
Does DEI President Trump's anti-DEI agenda play a role in this?
Well, first of all, the recruitment level for all branches of our military are at crisis levels, and it serves as a national security risk that our military branches are not fully staffed to where they need to be. And I do believe it's a culture problem within these institutions that the president is very much committed to fixing, as emphasized by the executive orders he has signed to root DEI out of the military. And I think when young men and women who are honorably signing up to serve in our nation's military see somebody like Pete Hegseth, the new Secretary of Defense, who is a proven warfighter, who risked his life in battle for this country, who understands what it means to deploy and to defend the Constitution and your nation abroad and to put your life on the line. When they see a leader like that, and a leader like President Trump, who is committed to peace through strength, that's very inspiring. And we look forward to seeing those recruitment numbers and retention numbers skyrocketing over the next 4 years. And I know Pete Hegseth is committed to increasing recruitment at all branches of the military. I would defer you to the Department of Defense on exactly what he plans to implement. Jeff.
Thanks very much. Two questions. One, the president yesterday used the word permanent for permanently resettle Palestinians. I hear you saying temporarily today. Is that a shift or a specific change that you want to highlight? And my second question is, Yesterday he spoke about the U.S. owning Gaza. Who owns Gaza now, and how would the U.S. acquire ownership?
Well, Gaza is currently run by Iranian-backed terrorists in the Middle East, Hamas, who we all agree, I think everybody in the region agrees, that can no longer stand. Just look at the events of October 7th and the events since. And the president, again, is committed to rebuilding the region for all people who want to return to it once it is no longer a demolition site and it's a place where people can actually live and thrive in harmony, as he said last night. His words, not mine. Daniel.
Permanent versus temporarily resettle? Can you just
The
clarify
president has made it clear that they need to be temporarily relocated out of Gaza for the rebuilding of this effort. Again, it's a demolition site right now. It's not a livable place for any human being. And I think it's actually quite evil to suggest that people should live in such dire conditions. Daniel.
Caroline, thank you so much. The daily guidance says that the president will be meeting with a pair of governors today, Governor Abbott of Texas and Governor Newsom of California. It comes after the president took executive action to turn the water back on in California. Billions of gallons are flowing now. What can you tell us about the two meetings and the importance of President Trump's actions to help people in California?
Sure. Those meetings will be taking place shortly, so I will get out of here to get to those meetings. We can always provide you a readout, as we always do. We try to be very transparent about what the president is doing in the Oval Office. Perhaps he'll even call you in to join him. We never know around here, as you all know. But Governor Abbott is obviously a great friend and an ally to the president. He has been on the front lines of the border crisis in this country. And as for Governor Gavin Newsom, well, the president is willing to work with anybody from blue states or red states to do what's best for the American people. And he really enjoyed, the president really enjoyed his trip to Pacific Palisades last week. He felt very inspired by the frustration of the residents there. And he has been wholeheartedly committed to ensuring that the water is flowing in California to prevent these wildfires, and also that people have access to their properties. And he has continued to apply tremendous pressure to Gavin Newsom and also the Los Angeles mayor to allow private residents and property owners to access their property. He believes that's their right to do so, and they should be able to do it. And one more thing before I wrap up, because I do want to get to these meetings, and I will see you all at the EO signing later this afternoon. I would just say that you brought to mind California and North Carolina, who continue to be on our hearts, and the president and this administration are committed to ensuring that these individuals get the funding that they need. And I would just say a strong message to Democrats who are out there pretending to be outraged about the long list of crap that this administration is cutting, federal waste and funding, like $2 million for sex changes in Guatemala, $6 million to fund tourism in Egypt, $20 million on a new Sesame Street show in Iraq, $4.5 million to combat disinformation in Kazakhstan. I could go on, and I'm happy to provide this list to every single one of you. Democrats are outraged that the American people want to be, they want their taxpayers going to good uses, not stuff like this. But then they're very quiet about the fact that there are still North Carolinians and people in California who have lost everything, and in the last 4 years, this federal government did nothing to help them. This president will continue to put Americans first, and I think the successes of this week so far speak to that, and it's only Wednesday. So I'll see you guys later this week, and we'll see you this afternoon. Thank you very much.
So remarkable. I think it's just absolutely remarkable. Excuse me while I cough there. Execution, delivery, everything is just tremendous on her part. But again, the nice thing is at the very end, she's continuing to bring in inefficiencies and things that just are ridiculous. New items, not the same old ones. So we heard a subset earlier when I played her video of talking to the press outside on the White House grounds. And again, here, what was it, $2 million for that Sesame Street episode in Iraq? Like what? Really? Everything just seems so ridiculous and just outrageous when you put it together like that, right? It just makes no sense. Why would you put money towards those types of things? Like it makes no sense whatsoever, right? Uh-oh. What's going on with my connection? Having some connection issues. There was some bad weather here. I hope you guys can still hear me. I hear it kicking up. Yeah, I don't know what's going on. Let me look over here on this. The stream is dying. Oh no. Come on. Come on, guys. Don't do this to me. Try to reload one more thing. See, I can't tell right now if I'm still going or not. I'm getting zero feedback on the live stream here. I don't know. Let me get the music going a little bit more. I'll try to sort out the live stream data issue I am experiencing. Why is it doing that? Yeah, something's getting messed up. I'm not seeing the chat or anything, but I don't even know if I'm still fully connected quite yet at the moment, but I did want to take a look at markets. So, I mean, Fed, a little underwhelming with the performance of what was going on there in that session. But let's get the good old Dow up here. Okay, the full chart. CPU chart. Let's run daily here. What do we see? Yeah, more testimony by Powell coming up. Money flow seems to be dipping again here. Let me make this a little bit bigger so you can see it. So this red money flow, it's got a pretty sharp slope headed in the wrong direction. The candlestick chart back. Momentum's headed downward. Gotta watch it. I mean, if we break and close below 44, that's a not so bueno sign to me on the Dow. 41 the next mark, and if we don't hit, can't sustain that. Just gotta look all the way back at some of these other marks. 40. Alternative assets. Not financial advice. I just want to take a quick look with Powell, what kind of influenced the markets during the day here. Just marginal, just kind of on the sidelines. See if anything comes up tomorrow that might move things. But hey guys, I don't even know if I'm live right now. Something happened with my my data that was coming through. Looks like the X stream got cut completely. I didn't even see any chat messages coming through at all. Oh wait, I got it on my phone. Okay, I gotta look at my phone, guys, to see if the chat messages are coming through. Jeez Louise. Where's this? Who feeds chickens anyway? Paul, you're the only one left. What am I doing after? I'm probably going to sleep after this. Water is the new gold. I keep hearing that. I've been hearing that for at least 3 or 4 years now. Yeah, I mean, where do I go with that? Desalinization? Like, I don't know where to go with that. I need to spend a little more time on that one. Don't buy Doge. Yeah, I'm not buying Doge. I don't like any memes. I know people are like, oh, look, the meme went up 1,000% or whatever, but 9 times out of 10, excuse me, it goes up 1,000%. And that person's paper rich, and they go to sleep and wake up the next day, and it's they're down like 20%. So like, I don't know. I don't do the meme stuff. New Zealand's plenty of water. All right, Weston. We should put a petition out there. Like, who do we invade next? We can kind of go from there, maybe. Market's fine. Don't worry about it yet. There's just with respect to the markets, I'm just worried about some of the consumer numbers, stuff that you don't see on CPI or GDP or some of these other, like just looking at the Dow itself. The inflation has brought so much money into asset prices. PE ratios are extremely high in my view, but I don't think they're at the point of irrational exuberance like a dot-com bubble quite yet. But does that matter? I mean, it could still just be too high as it is now. I don't know. It just doesn't feel quite good. So I'm actually hoping there is a dip because I've just gone to cash and I'm waiting for time to pick something up. Like, can we see a 20-30% correction? Or, well, it wouldn't be a correction, but a little bit of a bear market here. Like, can we hit right here? 37.5? Is that possible? Start buying back in at that point? What's after that? Oh, if you break 37.5, what's that? I'll look at that a little more closely. I'm gonna have to look at that more weekly. There's too much data here on an hourly chart. But anyway, guys, hey, I appreciate you guys so much. Thanks for joining in, talking through this stuff. There is some thoughts that a colleague of mine has had coming up with a proposal that we're going to try and push out there, see if we can get some support from you guys as well on it. Oh, this music, it's killing me, There is a proposal that is out there from a colleague of mine, try to get some support around it. A new mechanism to kind of help promote American workers and help improve wage growth here in the United States and fix that system, disincentivize the labor arbitrage that we've seen over the past couple of decades. Because at this point, it's getting a little silly, right? And I listen to Tucker Carlson every now and then, and he was asked about displacement of transportation workers, right, with automated vehicles, automated trucks, and he said he would put a stop to it if he had any control. He would absolutely put a stop to it because there's millions of people that that is their job, either through driving trucks across the country to deliver goods, delivery drivers, you name it. That is their main mechanism of employment, and they get paid well to do it. So why would you automate that and displace millions of people? And of course, you do that all at once in a very short time frame because it's possible, right? Just manufacturing automated vehicles like crazy. Why displace all those people that quickly with no alternative? Like, you got to stop, not do that, and figure something out, a path forward, or that's just not the way we're going to go. And I think there needs to be a little bit more thinking like that across the board, so that there's not these massive overnight shifts. Because just like asset prices, a broken system, and you drop money into it, it'll inflate the value of those assets that exist in this system that's not very perfect, or doesn't have to be perfect, just is not designed to benefit the right folks. Same thing will happen in that case. So how do you disincentivize people from making American workers last, but maybe putting them first? How do you, well, not disincentive, how do you incentivize people to put American workers first? So some thoughts around that coming up. Just need to wrap up some data and maybe package up the language a little bit simpler. But I appreciate my colleague for kind of giving this some really interesting thoughts. So upcoming one, episode 50. I don't know. Do we do that on episode 50? Should there be something fun that happens on episode 50? I don't know. Caught me on that one, but I have no idea if anyone's still listening because my stats are all jacked up. I do see my phone though. Paul, I appreciate you. Tim, thanks for comments. Say like and subscribe, y'all. We're gonna play the theme song on the way out here. Take care, everyone.
Darkness falls, truth emerges. Political cow unveils the lies. Behind the screen, wisdom surges, lighting up hate with her eyes. In the shadows, secrets lurk. She exposes, she ignites. With every post, she does the work, unmasking darkness, revealing lights. Political cow, the beacon bright, unveiling truth, banishing night. With every post, she does the work, unmasking darkness, revealing lights. Oh, what? Political cow, the beacon bright, unveiling truth, banishing night. Her voice cuts through, stark and raw, shattering deception, breaking the law. Icons crumble, empires fall. She stands tall, fierce and cold. Her voice echoes a thunderous call. In the chaos, her strength unfolds. False prophets scatter, truth ascends. The world watches, mesmerized. Political cow's battle never ends. In her light, dark meets its demise. Political cow, the beacon bright, unveiling truth, banishing night. At every post, she does the work, unmasking darkness, revealing lights. Political cow, the beacon bright, unveiling truth, banishing night. Her voice cuts through, stark and raw, shattering deception, breaking the law. Political cow, political cow. Political cow, political cow. The beacon bright, unveiling truth, banishing night. Her voice cuts through, stark and raw, shattering deception, breaking the law. Breaking the law, breaking the law, breaking the law. Political cow, icons crumble, empires fall. She stands tall, fierce and cold. Her voice echoes a thunderous call. In the chaos, her strength unfolds. False prophets scatter, truth ascends. The world watches, mesmerized. Political cow's battle never ends. And in her light, dark meets its demise. False prophets